Killer tornadoes touched down in our city. Tonight we mourn the deaths of 25 people, possibly more to come. The medical examiner's office has identified most of the victims. First, those killed in the Evergreen Trailer Park. 5 have been named. 15-year-old Sharon Andrechow, 50-year-old Merle Bain, Marie Barker, also 50 years of age, 55-year-old Lloyd Fankenel, 73-year-old Etta Nolan. From the devastation in southeast Edmonton's industrial area, 19-year-old George Demetrios, 30-year-old Ajmer Dhaliwal, 29-year-old Richard Gillespie, 18-year-old Daniel Lewis, 40-year-old Edito Mendoza, 54-year-old Clement Nault, 43-year-old Graham Palmer, and 41-year-old Gregory Trebinick. The cause of death in all cases is listed as multiple blunt injuries. 11 people remain to be identified. The Red Cross is compiling lists of victims and survivors. It is crucial that if you are one of the people displaced by the storm, or if a member of your family is still missing, that you call the Red Cross at 423-2680. There will no doubt be many memorial services in the days to come. The first we've heard about will be an ecumenical service Monday at 10 in the morning at St. John Bosco's Roman Catholic Church. Well, city officials are working through the weekend to try and assess the total damage and return essential services back to normal. Earl Morgan and photographer Rick Bremnes flew over the tornado's path today to retrace its wide swath of destruction.
It was mid-afternoon when reports began filtering in. Tornadoes were hitting down in Edmonton. It cut a wide path along the eastern outskirts of the city from the south to the north. After first touching down in Beaumont, the twisters moved toward the city. Farmland on the outskirts were the first to feel its effects. The outer edge of Mill Woods was next. Here we see the just over 24 houses that were either completely or partially destroyed. Tornadoes then moved along the path of power lines into the county of Strathcona, hitting an industrial park where it claimed its first victims.
If the route had been a mile or two further into the city, the destruction and deaths could have been a major catastrophe, and I think, relatively speaking, God was on our side in that respect, but it doesn't minimize the tremendous tragedy that did occur.
The storm then turned back toward the city, hitting the outskirts of the northeast neighborhood of Clairview. Mayor DeCory is disappointed that Environment Canada could not give more advance warning about the severity of the storm and wants a review of the procedures.
I'm told that the environment meteorologists cannot give notice of a tornado until they actually make the visual sighting of a tornado. I'd like that reviewed. I'm not casting any fingers or aspersions or making it sound like it could have been better, because I'm not sure. But perhaps if we had better warning, maybe something different could have been done. Maybe more time could have been given to some people.
The tornado then began moving away from the city, leaving one final fatal blow before leaving at the Evergreen Trailer Court. Of the 20 that died in Edmonton, 13 deaths occurred here. Private security personnel were hired to protect the damaged property and personal belongings during the night.
One of the uppermost things in our minds that we had to really look after security. It's tragedy enough to lose your property, and it's even worse when somebody goes in and steals it from a site like that. So security was a very key thing in both areas, particularly the one in the Evergreen Trailer Park. And we had good security on there right from the beginning. We had one incident throughout the night where a vehicle was observed traveling towards the area and into the area, and we suspected it may be there for a purpose of looting, but we found it was unfounded. So we've really had no incidents that we know of yet of people stealing from the sites.
The city responded to the disaster in a way never seen before. This is the miracle on 119th Street. Hundreds of cars began arriving late last night with food, clothing, and money for the victims. Others have stayed to give a helping hand.
I really think we're going to have to find a new word and put it in the dictionary to describe it. We've been going non-stop for 24 hours. We have got probably about 15,000 square feet of warehouse space now, and it's full. We've got a secondary warehouse that we arranged with the mayor when he was here at the Old Western GMC warehouse on Kingsway. We've got over 100 volunteers working here. There is no way that we can keep up with the supply. People are bringing things in faster than we can even begin to sort them.
The final word at the center is that for now they are asking people to stop dropping off items to give them at least a couple of days to sort through everything. That will allow them time to get out as fast as possible the supplies needed to the storm victims. Earl Morgan, 2-3 TV Eyewitness News.
And it seems, as always, when tragedy does strike, that's when the community binds even closer together. Earl Morgan is in the studio live with us right now. Earl, first question, how far are we before getting essential services back in place again?
Well, Darrell, we're probably at least another day or two, because there's at least 2,000 homes that are without gas still in various parts of the city, mostly in the Mill Woods area. They have to put in a complete new phone exchange, of course, in the Evergreen Trader Court, and they're trying to install emergency phone lines now. And as well, they have a few spotted areas in the city where they still have to get at with other services.
What about possible dangers when you're talking of gas, no gas left for some houses and some electricity out? Has there been, and is there still any danger to anyone from gas leaks, electrical lines that may still be live?
Most of the gas has been shut off. In fact, all the gas has been shut off in the affected areas. But as you saw in the aerial photos, there's still several down power lines, and you're being asked, if you come across any power lines, even in the city or outside, not to go near them, but report them. They may or may not have been reported yet.
Good advice. Something the mayor brought up was that he was hoping or wishing or yearning that there could have been just a little bit more time to give, especially the residents in Evergreen, a little more time to hide, to get to some shelter. Is there any chance of getting more warning when you're talking about tornadoes?
Well, what he was talking about is he was saying that it would be better to err on the side of caution, because he mentioned that the weather office cannot say we have tornado until they see it. And he's saying if you're getting reports of them, then maybe you should say there are reported sightings of tornadoes, unofficial. That way people could probably get to the basements of the areas that are going to be hit, if you can tell where it's going to go. Evergreen was something that would have been tough, because there's no basements and trailers, but still there may have been something that they could do to take evasive action. He's not critical of Environment Canada. He's just saying maybe they should be able to change their policy to be a bit more open-ended on that.
And the bottom line is, if you're wrong, a little bit of a red face is a lot better than what we saw in the Evergreen Court.
Exactly.
The other thing that we've been seeing today is an incredible reaction from Edmontonians to try and help out. Volunteer services, food, clothing. You saw Heather Airth in the report from Earl. How is everything going as far as relief services are concerned?
Absolutely phenomenal. Last night there was 1,000 city emergency personnel called into service. That's the fire department, the police department, and ambulance. All were up to full staff. They called in people off shift that were on holidays, anybody they could get hold of, and virtually everybody they contacted came in. The only ones they didn't call were people who were supposed to come in early today, because they knew they needed some fresh personnel at some point in the game. As far as at the Emergency Relief Center, it's absolutely phenomenal. You go down there and it's like a beehive of activity. It's like an anthill. There's just people, nobody's telling anybody what to do. It's just all getting done, and people are dropping in with $2,000 donations and $500 donations and whatever is needed in the way of cash, because you still have to buy gas and things to get all these supplies out. And clothes and food. It's absolutely phenomenal. I couldn't believe it. But what, I should mention again that what Heather is asking is that people at least try and slow down in that area for at least just a couple of days, because they have no time to sort it. It's just coming in, and in the next couple of days, people are going to start coming in that were struck by the tornado, that are victims, that are looking for some kind of relief now, and if they can't hand it out if they don't know what they've got. So they're saying, please, just hold it for a couple of days.
As a reporter who has been in Edmonton for many years, is there anything more anyone else could have done to help relieve the disaster?
I don't think there's anybody who's going to be too critical of emergency services. I mean, all units were booked to capacity last night. Every unit in the city was out. So I don't think anybody that was seriously hurt was missed intentionally anyway. I'm sure there's people that may still be missing or may have been injured, but not because the city didn't know they were there.
Earl Morgan, thank you very much, and we'll be back after this break. We continue now with the coverage of those devastating tornadoes from yesterday. The devastation continued into southeast Edmonton's industrial area. Twisted steel and piles of rubble are everywhere, and it is through that destruction that searchers are looking. This report is from Bill Marks.
A scene of total devastation. As dawn broke over southeast Edmonton's industrial area, rescue crews who had worked through the night carefully sifted through the rubble, searching for bodies believed to be buried beneath the demolished buildings, the steady drizzle of rain hampering their efforts. Officials say the chances of finding survivors is slim.
There were victims found in among the rubble here.
What are the chances of finding any survivors after the rain all night and the lengthy wait it's been?
I would say very unlikely indeed, to be absolutely honest, but of course there's always that hope that there is someone out there that we can rescue, but I think if anyone is under there now, then they're not likely to be alive.
The twister cut a 10-square block path of destruction, which killed at least 7 people here, injuring more than 150.
I got here about 2 minutes before it hit, and just parked my car, and I went to the back of the shop and walked in, and I just heard it coming, and I don't know what it was. I just figured the best thing to do was stand in the door frame, and I went back over and I looked where I was standing before, and I think that's the only thing. The steel door frame, the door was over me, is the only thing that saved my life.
You banged up pretty bad?
Yeah, I went to the doctor last night, and he wants to see me again today, but it should be all right.
More than 150 firemen and police officers, assisted by about 100 volunteers, are at the disaster scene, believing more victims will be found beneath the piles of brick, wood, and shredded metal. Other rescue crews combed the surrounding fields, searching for bodies that could have been carried by the winds which exceeded 120 kilometers an hour. The twisters hit with such force that cars were thrown across roads like play toys. Telephone poles snapped like toothpicks, bark was stripped from broken trees, and metal electrical towers reduced to twisted, contorted skeletons strewn on the ground.
The bangs, cuts and scrapes, that's all. Just about sucked them out the door.
Some of the lucky survivors returned to the disaster scene to survey the carnage caused by the tornadoes.
I'm just coming back to see what I can salvage, some tools and whatnot, and I was looking for my ID.
What are your plans now?
I don't know. Get through this. I lost my vehicle and whatnot, so go look for another job, I guess.
In the rural community of Beaumont, 10 kilometers south, more destruction and broken dreams. 73-year-old Jerry Henschel watched the tornado tear his barn from the foundation, sucking it across his lawn, where it slammed into a power pole. His garage and 2 cars also destroyed. And at this dairy farm, lost cattle, the high winds throwing this animal 50 meters to its death. Back in the hard-hit industrial area, damage is estimated to be in the millions. Officials with disaster services and the Edmonton Police Department say search crews will continue sifting through this rubble until they're sure that no bodies remain buried, and that job could take at least a week. In the meantime, all the lucky survivors who lived through this carnage can do is thank God they're alive and try to get on with the rest of their lives.
Queen Elizabeth sent a telegram to Lieutenant Governor Helen Hunley today expressing shock in hearing about the devastating tragedy in our city. The telegram reads, quote, "I was deeply shocked to hear the dreadful tornado which caused such widespread havoc in Edmonton. Please pass my deepest sympathy to those that have been so tragically bereaved and all the others that have suffered." It is signed Elizabeth R. Well, we can tell you about the victims, tell you about the destruction, but it is only when you see what happened that one realizes how devastating the twisters were. We have this report from Bob Chelmick.
They searched through the night, soldiers, firemen, volunteers, looking for survivors. And more often, they found victims. For hours, they dug through this one pile of rubble, a home, looking for an elderly woman. She had not found the safety of a nearby basement.
The grandmother, right?
That's what they said, yeah.
Yeah, that's what they said, the older woman, yeah.
So, if that's the case...
Well, we haven't been through this.
Yeah, we'll go right through this, because there's a bunch of bedding and stuff in here, too.
Yeah.
So we'll go through this whole thing right
here. This is supposed to be an older lady, eh?
Yeah, and a heavy-set lady?
Yeah.
At 2 o'clock this morning, they found what they were looking for. But the woman was dead. Her body taken from the wreckage of her home to a temporary morgue set up in a nearby restaurant. But miraculously, in all this, there was life.
A newborn baby pulled from the wreckage, frightened but alive. A 13-year-old girl found huddled in a washroom, the only room not destroyed in her family's home. Her parents had disappeared. A family pet in shock, cowering in the back seat of a car.
As the morning dawned in gloomy overcast and drizzle, teams of emergency workers and volunteers were still feverishly sifting through the rubble looking for the dead and the injured. Many could only stand and wonder at nature's enormous power. They could only weep and look for strength within and with others. Speaking of what had happened was sometimes very hard.
How do you feel now?
I'm very, very upset because I know a lot of my neighbors are gone. I know they are.
People didn't know where the children were, where their husbands, their wives. People were running in from the highway, leaving their cars a mile away and running in, trying to find anyone they knew to find out news, eh?
Did you find any people?
I dug until just about 12 o'clock last night, and all we found was a dog and a cat. And we were looking through 3 trailers that were piled on top of each other. Just about a quarter of the park has been wiped out.
Did you lose any friends?
Yes, I did.
Were they neighbors?
They're friends.
And it was like a freight train coming closer and closer and louder until you couldn't hear anything anymore. It was just screaming. The first kid that came in was screaming, "My auntie is dead, my auntie is dead." And your first reaction is that, well, kids panic fairly easily and you know, it's just maybe they were knocked out or something. But then other people were coming in afterwards saying that there were whole families lying dead on lawns, and it was so hard just to take it all in.
You know, it's a mobile home park. It's not, you know, a lot of people are going to say, "I'll never live in a mobile." Well, that's wrong, because there's houses, it didn't matter what it was. There's Kenworths that are just tied in knots. There's service stations, brick, it's gone. It wouldn't have mattered what it was. If it walked through a residential in the city, it would have been the same thing.
It was much the same in the Clairview residential neighborhood, several miles away from the Evergreen Mobile Home Park. The damage ranged here from missing roof shingles to missing houses, but miraculously, no one here was killed. This man has learned the meaning of miracles. His wife, a friend, and his tiny son were at home as the twister tore apart their $120,000 two-story house. All were injured, but all will survive.
He was in his crib, and when she found him, there's no crib, and we still can't find the crib anywhere, and he was laying on the floor, on the rug in the house, underneath some debris.
In that rubble?
Yeah.
What are your feelings?
I have no feelings. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do next. It's just, all my friends are helping me out, and that's all you can go by.
You haven't lost anybody, though. I guess you must feel very lucky.
I just can't imagine it. They're just so lucky somebody was looking out for them.
The horror of this storm was tempered by some signs of good fortune. As luck would have it, the Evergreen Trailer Park was not nearly as crowded as it would have been an hour later. It could have taken hundreds of lives. The twister also missed the most populated areas of the city. If it had been a few miles to the north and west, thousands may have perished. The path through the industrial area just missed tearing apart the plants where dangerous chemicals are produced. But in the industrial northeast, other enterprises were not so lucky.
This used to be the Sherwood Industrial Park, Strathcona County, just outside of Edmonton. 5 people died here. 1 is still in critical condition.
This is described today as still a very dangerous area. Stores of flammable and possibly deadly chemicals still pose a real hazard. The emergency response team says it may be a long time before the Sherwood Industrial Park is safe. But the buildings and the machines are one thing. The millions of dollars in property damage is minor compared to the real human tragedy.
In some parts of the trailer park, total devastation. Splintered glass, shattered lumber, broken furniture, and broken dreams. Memories of happiness gone by. Many people died in this trailer court. Many more were injured. And from now on, for the next couple of weeks, hundreds will be looking for help from the Alberta government.
What I've tried to tell the people I've met is that you will not be asked as individuals to take care of this. You couldn't ask individuals to protect themselves against this or to rebuild from it. The province and all of the community pulling together are going to do it. We're going to rebuild for them.
Would you say something to those people who have lost loved ones?
Well, I've met some, and I can only say that my wife and I express, on behalf of all Albertans and I guess Canadians, our tremendous sense of sharing their grief and sympathy. And for them, those who survive, that we will help them in every way possible. We're going to do that at every stage of this rebuilding, and they can count on the support of the province.
Is there anything we can learn from this?
So it's so difficult, Bob, because nature humbles you and leaves you so helpless. To prepare for this kind of a move by nature is almost impossible. And I guess the only thing is to know that our various organizations have responded so superbly.
Some people I've talked to have lost everything, their days, they don't know where to turn. What do they do next?
That they aren't alone. That the community, the province, the country are all with them. And that if they'll just get to some shelter organization or one of the assistance areas, we'll help them. We know that there's a second wave going to hit of emotional impact. This is physical so much now. And rather than waiting for those people to come for us, we're developing right now outreach programs where we're going to be going throughout these communities to reach them, not have them try to find us.
Many of these are low-income people living in mobile homes. Yes. Insurance is not going to cover much of it.
And they aren't going to be asked to rely on insurance if it isn't covered. I've already told many of them, we don't expect individuals to protect themselves from this kind of devastation by nature. The province is going to step in and help them. We aren't going to do it on a legalistic basis. We're going to do it based on compassion and generosity of the whole community behind them.
Just what did the Prime Minister offer?
He offered any of the resources of the country, whether there was helicopters, military. As a matter of fact, I've discussed today with the RCMP, and they may well get military help, because there's now a problem with still searching for bodies and protecting from looting, and it may well stretch them too thin. And so I think they will be calling in military assistance.
Thank you, Mr. Premier.
You're welcome, Bob.
We've been hearing over the last day about how much damage these tornadoes have done. Into the hundreds of millions are some of the estimates, but it is the human tragedy which is hitting home to most of us. The destructive power is almost incredible of a tornado. Bob Chelmick is in our studio live with us today. Bob, how can you describe just what that tornado was able to do?
I think, Darrell, it's impossible to describe the force. It's impossible to believe the force when you're actually at the site, looking at the destruction that it caused. Perhaps one story, besides those pictures of the multi-ton vehicles turned over, not to mention the homes that were torn apart, perhaps one story sums up some aspect of the power of that tornado. A policeman at the Evergreen Trailer Court told me the story. There was a washing machine that was found near Bonaccord, and inside the washing machine there was a sales slip, and it indicated that the purchase had been made by someone who lived in the Evergreen Court. That's about 30 kilometers away. The wind picked up a washing machine, which I couldn't pick up, and took it 30 kilometers before setting it down somewhere else. It's just mind-boggling. And I think right now, I think the phase we're in is amazement. There are lots of people going through grief, but I think the real grief, as Premier Getty suggested, is yet to come. I think it's going to sink in the next few days, and that's when we'll really feel the heart pinch.
It's a matter of everybody has a job to do. We have to try and get the people who are victims of this clothed and sheltered, but then it will be a week later.
I'm sure. And you know, Edmonton hasn't ever experienced such a force of nature, has never experienced a tornado. This is the worst, of course, in Canadian history. I think perhaps we are totally unable to deal with it emotionally because it is such a freak experience. I'm not saying that the people of Texas or Kansas are able to deal with it much better, but at least they have sort of a fatalistic attitude because it happens every year. But here, a totally freak new experience that we're all going to have to get to deal with inside over time.
Well, whenever we hear of disasters of this magnitude, and indeed this was a huge disaster on any world scale, we also hear of stories of people being able to pull together to be able to deal with what has happened. You spoke to a lot of people out on the streets of Edmonton who were involved in that, who were victims of the tornado. Were you able to feel any of that strength from them?
I did. I did get a real sense that there is a helping hand being outstretched to these people from total strangers, certainly from their friends. There's still a great deal of concern about people not being able to get in touch with those that they think may have been there at the time or in that industrial park. There is that sense too. So there's real fear. But I think what we're seeing now is a real sense of community building and focused around places like the Emergency Relief Center and disaster services. And that, of course, takes a tragedy sometimes to bring it forth. But that is in itself heartwarming.
It's when a disaster such as this strikes at a city with a metro population of some 800,000, definitely pulls together. Thank you for joining us, Bob. We'll be back after this break.
Dr. Eileen Kelly.
Well, after yesterday's weather abomination, we are pleased to be able to relate somewhat better weather news for you tonight. It will be overcast this evening with some rain.
The death toll in the wake of the devastating storm is 25. The medical examiner's office has yet to identify 11 bodies, and scores of people are still missing. 14 of the dead have been positively identified. The Red Cross is coordinating the effort to match names with inquiries. People are asked to call the Red Cross at 423-2680 if they have reported someone missing and have indeed found them. The Emergency Relief Center desperately needs volunteers, cash donations, and cardboard boxes. The center is located at 10820 119th Street. The call for food and clothing has been adequately met at this time. Many insurance companies have opened their doors over this long holiday weekend. Claimants are asked to call their individual company to check to see if the business is open. So far, we've been notified of one memorial service. St. John Bosco Roman Catholic Church in North Edmonton will hold an ecumenical memorial mass on Monday at 10 a.m. Michelle Jones, 2-3 TV, Eyewitness News.
At Edmonton, Alberta is being called the deadliest to hit Canada in 75 years. It swept down on that prairie city of 650,000 during a storm of heavy rain, hail, and high winds. It killed at least 27 people and injured 200. NBC's James Makawa describes what happened.
The search for survivors of yesterday's tornado is over. Officials believe all the missing have been accounted for. Some residents returned to what was left of their homes to salvage what they could. The homeless were given shelter and food. In this trailer park, one of the hardest hit communities, residents were stunned.
I lost my son 7 months ago today, and now I gotta find my other one. I can't talk.
The tornado struck without warning. As it ripped through some sections of Edmonton, cars were lifted and thrown off the highway. Survivors told tales of horror.
Then I come down the road, and all those people that passed me, they're in the hospital now. They're hurt. One guy has no eyes. He tore his eyes right out from here right down to here. He's got no eyes. The other guy is in the field. His car's level. I don't know how he got out of it.
There was people and bodies all over, and people just looked and drove. You can't do that. That's not human.
Throughout the day and night, more than 200 victims were rushed to 3 city hospitals by ground and by air. The mayor of Edmonton could not believe what he saw.
Well, I've never seen twisted beams like I saw just now. I've never seen washers and dryers and completely mangled. There's 3 big piles of stuff, about 4 or 5 trailers that they're working on to see if there are any bodies underneath. In one of those piles, there's a dog barking. And they think that the owner may be with the dog. It's terrible.
There is disbelief that the tornado, which destroyed so much, killed and injured so many, lasted just 35 minutes. James Makawa, NBC News, Edmonton, Canada.
Good evening. Rescue workers in Edmonton poured through mounds of wreckage today trying to find both survivors and victims of yesterday's devastating tornadoes. A series of tornadoes along with savage winds swept through the city yesterday afternoon. 25 people are known dead, although earlier it was believed more had died. About 200 people have been injured. More from Henry Kowalski.
The tornado ripped through the middle of the Evergreen trailer court. On each side, there is little damage, but the rest is a pile of rubble and a storehouse of grief. Joanne Merriam lost her house. It is simply a jumble of personal belongings and twisted building materials. Her friends helped her find some small personal treasures. That's all this storm let her keep.
Is there anything? What did you find when you came back?
Nothing.
Is it all gone?
At least her family survived. This woman, clutching a bundle of letters, lost her son. Just 6 months ago, she had lost another son. It had been hot in Edmonton, well over 30 degrees. Abruptly, it went cold. The temperature plunged to 12 degrees. It was the perfect combination for twisters. At 1:40 in the afternoon, the weather office said there could be a storm. Then there would be a storm. But it didn't issue a tornado alert until it actually saw the first one. This is weather office policy, and the mayor would like that changed.
Perhaps if we had had better warning, maybe something different could have been done. Maybe more time could have been given to some people.
An industrial zone was laid to waste first. The fury toppled steel buildings. Trains were derailed. 11 people would die here, hit by debris. The coroner calls the cause of death multiple blunt injuries. But the storm saved its worst blow for the trailer park. One twister hit, and when people thought it was over, a second hit.
This trailer was just shaking. It was like a, I don't know, like a rocking chair. It was just, and then it lifted, and then it set back down again. I thought maybe, you know, I said to myself, as soon as it lifted, I said, I'm going to die, like that. I said, I'm going to die, eh? And then it set back down again. I said, well, maybe I'm all right. And all of a sudden, it just, boom, and it just lifted about 10 feet, and then the roof blew off, just gone. The whole roof was gone, and then it just lifted maybe about another 20 feet, and it just started twisting in a circle, and then it just blew, and then all of a sudden, boom. Because I remember I was hanging on the couch, and then it was gone. And then all I can remember doing is the trailer was gone, like it blew up, and I can just remember smashing into things and rolling and being picked up and tossed. Like I just didn't fall. I got smashed into the boards and then picked up again and thrown in the trees and then picked up and thrown in the dirt.
Down the streets, the tenants were running and staggering, crying.
By midnight, the search was for victims, not survivors. 14 people were dead here, 200 injured. If the storm had been just a couple of hours later, more people would have been home from work. More might have died. 8 people are still in critical condition, including a 7-day-old baby who was buried in the rubble for hours. Half of the victims have not been identified. They are so badly disfigured. Dental plates will have to be used for positive identification. There is still a great deal of confusion. Dozens of people are still missing. Anguished relatives can only wait, not knowing whether the news will be good or bad.
It just seemed like they just lost them. Just don't know where they are, you know?
Some people were lucky today to carry away even a little something. Others had their houses leveled before they were allowed to even sift through the debris.
I wouldn't say I'd want to live here after, no. After something like this, you just, like I said, how can you come back and sit and live here and look at this? How can you do it?
Records will show this as one of the worst weather disasters in Canadian history. But those are only words. No one will really understand what they mean unless they lived or saw this mangled wreckage that was once a place called Evergreen. Henry Kowalski, CTV News, Edmonton.
Friends, neighbors, and absolute strangers joined hands today as a massive effort began to help the victims of the tornadoes. And offers of help have come into the Red Cross from as far away as Australia, England, and West Germany. More from Tom Clark.
It has come in a never-ending stream since the tornadoes hit.
Don't be afraid to load up on the clothes. Give her a lot. She just lost everything she's ever owned in her life.
Clothes, blankets, shoes, and food. Tons of it.
We've got about 1.5 to 2 tons of meat. We could use more of that.
by the carload and by the truckload.
We've got semi-trailers that we're just filling right up. It's just great. Five trailers.
5 trailers.
It's wonderful, yeah. It's great stuff.
There are now literally mountains of relief supplies donated by people from all parts of Alberta. There is so much that the Edmonton Relief Center has lost track of what it has. The center's director finds it all very hard to describe.
We're going to have to think up a new word for the dictionary because it has been absolutely awesome.
Alberta Premier Don Getty also found that words were hard to come by as he toured the worst of the destruction.
Nature humbles you and leaves you so helpless. To prepare for this kind of a move by nature is almost impossible.
But he pledged that money from the province to rebuild will not be a problem. Deputy Prime Minister Don Mazankowski and External Affairs Minister Joe Clark, both from Alberta, viewed the damage from the air.
We're not used to this sort of thing here. We have become accustomed to living with hard nature, but nature that has a different face than this kind of devastation.
The federal government said that they will also chip in just over $2 million. There is another dimension to this tragedy, one whose effects will last for months, perhaps even years. This is the Sherwood Industrial Park. It has been totally destroyed, and gone for the foreseeable future are hundreds and perhaps thousands of jobs. Today, some of those who used to work here came back.
This big gust of wind blew me, and I wound up underneath one of the machines there, and I just braved my life.
What are your plans now?
I don't know. Get through this. I lost my vehicle and whatnot, so go look for another job, I guess.
Some companies managed to salvage some of their vital documents. Others were not so lucky.
Laidlaw's invoices and accounting was spread over a man's lawn up at Legal, 40 miles from here. That's gone.
Jack Chesney fears that some of the companies that used to be here may not be able to survive. But it won't, he says, be for lack of spirit.
It's the young entrepreneur, the guts, and the risk taker, and he's here. I can show you what's left of his places, but he'll come back, believe me. And we'll all help him come back.
Tom Clark, CTV News, Edmonton.
Yesterday's storm in Edmonton is one of the worst natural disasters to hit Canada this century. The worst occurred in 1954. It was Hurricane Hazel, which cut a swath around Toronto and left 81 people dead. Also among the worst storms, a series of tornadoes that ripped through southern Ontario in 1985. They cut a zigzag path through several communities, including Barrie, leaving 12 people dead and 500 homes damaged or destroyed. Several other tornadoes have caused severe damage in Canada, including one in 1979 that killed 2 people in Woodstock, Ontario, and injured more than 140. Prime Minister Mulroney said today that he is shocked and saddened by the disaster in Edmonton. He commented while on a trip in eastern Quebec, and Mark Sickstrom has the details.
The Prime Minister received a warm and noisy welcome as he arrived in Les Escoumins. But when the disaster in Edmonton was mentioned, the auditorium became quiet as the residents of the small Quebec town reflected on the tragedy.
On behalf of the people of Canada and the government of Canada, I had the occasion last night to call Premier Getty to convey to him and to the people of Alberta and to the families of those affected by the tragedy our sense of shock and sorrow.
And the Prime Minister said the federal government will participate in the relief effort.
I had a conversation with Premier Getty in which I offered the full support of the government of Canada and the people of Canada in terms of programs that we might have available or others that perhaps we ought to have available.
The Prime Minister spent the rest of the day visiting 3 small communities near Quebec City. He then tried his hand at conducting a youth orchestra. But in his speech to the local Chamber of Commerce, Mulroney again spoke of the Edmonton disaster and how touched he was that the residents of Les Escoumins felt moved to pay tribute to the victims.
That's what Canada is all about, sharing. Sharing the good times and the bad.
Mulroney will be in Edmonton on Tuesday to announce an economic aid package that may total as much as $1 billion. The money was intended to go towards diversifying the Western economy, but now some of it may be used to rebuild houses and businesses shattered by Friday's tornado. Mark Sickstrom, CTV News, near Bay Saint Paul, Quebec.
And coming up later in our news, violence at Islam's holiest shrine.
The tornado of terror the day after.
25 dead, more than 200 injured. Those are the grim figures, the aftermath of the tornado that swept through the Edmonton area yesterday afternoon. Those numbers could change as rescue workers continue to sift through the rubble. Tonight is the second night after the tornado. All is quiet at the Evergreen Trailer Park, one of the hardest hit areas. Police have completely secured that area. Only authorized individuals are being let in. Officers on site say only half the area has really been searched in detail. There is still so much area to go through. Over at the Southeast Industrial Zone, regular Edmonton City Police, the RCMP, and volunteer community police are patrolling the area together. No work is being done there tonight. The Sherwood Park Freeway is open now. However, the turnoffs into the industrial area remain closed. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner has positively identified about a dozen victims from the Evergreen Trailer Park. They are 15-year-old Sharon Andruko, Merle Bain, 15 years old, and here are the names coming up on the screen. You can see them in just a few minutes. Marie Barker, also 50 years old, Lloyd Fankhanel, 55, Etta Nolan, 73, Mary Putnam, 59. From the Southeast Industrial Section, George Demetrius, 19, Azir Dalawal, 30 years old, Daniel Lewis, 18, Edito Mendoza, 40, Clement No, 54, Graham Palmer, 43, and Gregory Trebinick, 41 years old. The cause of death in each case is listed as multiple blunt injuries. This list, by the way, is just a partial one. More names are expected to be released tomorrow afternoon. Well, this is what it looked like yesterday as the tornado approached our city from the southeast. It was just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The funnel cloud, you can see it darkening the sky. Temperatures fell quickly and sharply. The tornado entered the city, then it sliced through the green belt. You can see it moving there, the green belt that separates Edmonton and Sherwood Park, and then, of course, it moved north. It's going to take weeks to repair the damage, a process that has already begun. As Kelly McClugan tells us tonight, the survivors are also picking up the pieces of their lives.
It is now dark, 8 hours since the tornado sliced through Edmonton's east side. In the Evergreen Trailer Park, one of the hardest hit areas of town, the cleanup effort continues. So does the search for the dead and the injured.
We've located a number of bodies and injured people, and we've removed them from the scene. We're still concerned that there might still be someone trapped or buried here, but we're just about finished now with mopping this up, and our concern now is looking after people's property.
That concern is on the mind of many residents, too. In Clairview, some spend the night surveying the damage, taking stock. For others, like this off-duty police officer, there is little left to take stock of.
This is some of your stuff, isn't it?
That's my little boy's. Left of it.
What is it?
Used to be a little crane I used to dig with. Backyard.
Yes, good morning. It's the Red Cross calling. I was wondering if you had any of the victims from the Evergreen area staying there.
Red Cross volunteers set out to hit nearly every downtown hotel, trying to locate missing victims, to match parents with their children.
The idea is to try to put as many families back together again. And right now they're scattered all over the place.
A lot of desperate people.
There's a lot of desperate people. And there's people from other cities in Canada phoning, looking for people, and it's a frustrating feeling not being able to tell them anything.
You're kidding. It took 10 hours.
Frustrating, too, for those waiting for word. At a makeshift emergency shelter set up in a local hotel in the northeast part of town, victims of the disaster huddle in hallways, telling their story to anyone who will listen.
Like the wind, like the door, I was holding. No, the door. I was holding the door, and the walls were just coming like this. You're holding, going like that, and then I said, "That's not her. She's gonna go. I'm not gonna go with it."
It is as though in the retelling, their experience somehow will become more believable. Dawn. By sunrise, a certain calm seems to settle over the sea of devastation. Back at the emergency shelter, it's the opposite. More and more people file in. But at this time of the day, they are not looking for a place to stay. These are the people looking for lost sons and daughters, fathers and mothers. Looking here because they have spent the whole night looking everywhere else.
Hello, Linda. Hi, Linda, sweetheart. How you doing, sweetheart?
For Harold Biggs, a night of gut-wrenching anxiety is finally over. His 22-year-old son has been found alive.
I wanted to jump through the phone and cuddle him, you know. It doesn't matter what his age, 22 years old, he's still my little boy.
She got out. She just got out.
At breakfast, another reunion, this time mother and daughter.
So I had no idea where she was, if she got out or if she was alive.
16-year-old Carrie Anderson was alive, but she'd spent a harrowing night trying to escape the Evergreen trailer park, lying on the floor of a neighbor's car as it drove through the path of the tornado.
I saw was black swirling things flying all over. We didn't know over there for a while, but everything will be fine now. You know, no matter what our home looks like, at least we're safe.
But for James Younger, not knowing what his home looks like is bothering him more than anything else right now. He was through a hurricane 17 years ago. His home was wiped out. He remembers the hardest part of all.
It was the aftermath, the personal things, like pictures, the albums, the papers, the letters, the things that afterwards that you can't replace. You can replace lights, you can replace furniture, but it was the things that we couldn't replace. That there's a whole gap in your life missing.
In the cold and in the rain, that is exactly what hundreds of people come back to look for. The things they can't replace. Kelly McClugan, CBC News, Edmonton.
Both the provincial and federal governments have promised to help victims, although a dollar figure has not yet been put on the aid package. Premier Getty is promising to replace every destroyed home. The federal government will probably spend 50 cents for every dollar Alberta puts forward. This morning, the Premier and his wife toured the hardest hit areas. Kevin Tibbles reports.
The Evergreen Trailer Park northeast of the city. A graveyard of twisted metal and rubble. 14 people lost their lives here yesterday afternoon in the space of about 10 minutes. Today, firefighters and volunteers looked for more. Missing, presumed dead. Today, the politicians came to look, to try and console those who may have lost everything they had in the world.
You will not be asked as individuals to take care of this. You couldn't ask individuals to protect themselves against this or to rebuild from it. The province and all of the community pulling together are going to do it. We're going to rebuild for them.
The Premier, along with several cabinet ministers, all said they couldn't believe their eyes.
What's worse, there are no words that can describe the harm to the families, you know, the grief, because there's been injury and death. And
There's bits of people's trailers, their possessions, boats, cars, everything all piled on top of each other. And I think what it indicates is that how the death toll was as high as it was. Can you imagine being in the middle of this while it was happening?
Just total disbelief. We've never seen anything like this. We're from southwestern Ontario, so we have seen tornadoes before, but we've never seen this sort of devastation.
This pile of rubble, no doubt, yesterday was somebody's home, and by looking at the toys in the ground here, some of the children's books, it's obvious that there were kids living here. It's not known whether or not anyone got out of this trailer alive. But what is known is that the words being used to describe this disaster all mean the same thing: horror. Sometimes that horror is written all over a person's face. And row upon row of twisted metal here in the Sherwood Park area. Giant question marks painted on the sides of wrecked buildings, because emergency officials have no way of knowing what dangerous chemicals may be leaking inside.
Also a Friday afternoon. Barrie, Ontario was ripped apart by a tornado. People left homeless, property completely destroyed. The Canadian insurance industry had never before dealt with such whole-scale property damage. Yesterday, it happened in Edmonton. But this time, the insurance industry says it's ready to take storm damage claims right away. Lauren Diebert is heading the emergency insurance team here in Edmonton. Just before this news conference, Diebert was in a plane, looking at the damage Edmonton's tornado had caused. He says it's going to total at least $50 million.
I believe the figure in Barrie was somewhat in excess of $100 million, and as I stated when we began this discussion, the devastation that I have seen in the Edmonton area appears to be considerably worse than that of the Barrie tornado of 2 years ago.
The emergency insurance team has got some advice for people in Edmonton. If you've got damage, call your insurance agent right away. Offices will be open all weekend. People who have lost their homes can most likely get some emergency money immediately. Tornado damage is covered under home insurance policies. If you've lost your insurance policy in the storm, don't worry. The industry has promised to honor all policies on file. If you've got any questions about insurance, there's an emergency number. Call 423-2212. Shauna Larrett, CBC News, Edmonton.
To help explain the path that the tornado took, we've made up a map for you. The tornado was first spotted in the Leduc-Beaumont area, moving northeast. And there it is at the bottom of the screen. Now, we're not sure just how many times the twister touched down. It literally hopped, skipped, and jumped along this route that you're seeing. The twister was next seen. There it is moving up through the Mill Woods area. And then it heads through the green belt that separates Edmonton from Sherwood Park. That's where it hit the industrial area. It then continued north towards Refinery Row, and from there it moved into the residential section of Clairview, then onto the Evergreen Trailer Park, where it caused so much death and devastation. The Weather Office isn't sure whether it was one tornado, maybe two, moving parallel to each other, and it will be days, of course, before data like that is completely analyzed. We also sent a helicopter today back over the path, and here's how that looked from the helicopter. On the outskirts of Mill Woods, trees snapped, houses leveled. Wherever the twister touched down, just meters away, you can see that other houses were completely untouched, and in Mill Woods itself, the roofs of houses were lifted right off. From the sky, it looked like a bunch of doll houses, just toys right down to the furniture.
Until someone reported this funnel yesterday, we didn't officially have a tornado. That's Environment Canada's policy, explained last night on CBC News.
Now, the rules for forecasting a tornado is that the tornado must be sighted before a forecast can be issued. So the initial warning that was sent out earlier could not include a tornado, even if it was suspected, if it had not been seen by anyone.
Edmonton's mayor says he watched that interview, and he's angry.
I think that we've got to impress upon Environment Canada that they've got to change that policy to give us a little more lead time.
But the people at Environment Canada say that's the policy for forecasters all over North America. Dave Burnett says, with no eyewitness, forecasters would often be crying wolf.
We now have a tornado, it's in a certain area,
Too late for those people, but in a long track, plenty of time to, well, not plenty of time, but sufficient time if we move very, very quickly and have cooperation of all agencies, we can warn a good number of the people.
I think that when you're dealing with a storm with this kind of intensity, I'd rather err on the side of caution than not. And perhaps an extra half hour, perhaps 15 minutes could have made a lot of difference.
An accurate count will be made of the hundreds of people who volunteered their time during the tornado disaster in Edmonton. Certainly they must number in the thousands, dozens of whom are manning telephones and radios in an attempt to trace Edmontonians being sought by families and friends outside the area.
To date, we have processed approximately 7,000 calls since the tornado hit on Friday. And the calls are continuously coming in. Our switchboard is lit up like a Christmas tree.
Okay. You have some advice to Edmontonians, whether they were living in the area that was affected or not.
Yes, in terms of people that have been affected in Edmonton, if they could contact relatives that may be concerned about their welfare, if they could attempt to contact their family members and indicate to them that they are safe and sound, it would take some of the pressure off of the calls that are coming into the Red Cross and give our people some relief.
So in fact you're talking about people with family out of the province.
That's correct. And that could be anywhere in the world, because we're receiving phone calls from Spain, from France, Germany, England, and so on. So they're not just solely confined to people that are in Canada.
Mark Pulishy, 2-3 TV, Eyewitness News.
The Red Cross still has an urgent need to contact 4 people still missing, but it's not believed they were caught up in the chaos of Friday. People are Colleen Graham, Keith Carter, Wally Chiadowski, and Marlene Fitzgerald. They're all believed to be in the Edmonton area. Red Cross needs to contact them fast. If any of these people are hearing this, or if you know where they are, please call the Red Cross at 428-2680. Everyone has a story about the great storm. Many accounts are heart-wrenching and tragic, others simply amazing, while others still are plain happy. Bob Chelmick has prepared this story of a great loss and of incredible luck.
Young Ryan Ebbinghoff surveys what's left of his family's home on an acreage on the outskirts of southeast Edmonton. His is one of the lucky stories of the terrible 2 hours Friday afternoon. The full force of nature pointed down from the skies, picked up his house, and threw it away. Ryan was in it at the time.
I was just reading some mail, and I felt the wind coming through my house so hard that my ears were popping. And I got up to check outside what was happening, and we have about 7-8 buildings on the property, and they were all just being torn down by the wind.
At that moment, Ryan's father was watching in horror from just down the road.
I was sitting with my vehicle over there and looking through the window, knowing that Ryan was in there, but I could see the house going up about 10 feet, turning around, and with a tremendous velocity moving over there in that direction, and that's where it ended up, right over there in all the rubble.
And then, just like that, I went out of the window and started rolling into my lawn, and I started getting hit with debris and stuff from the storm.
You were sucked out of the window?
Yeah, with the rest of the house.
Did you feel like you were getting pulled up into the air?
Yeah, I got pulled out, and then I just was blowing along the ground just like a piece of gravel.
And Ryan ended up right here in the brushes, right over there. So I just ran right across here and hollered for Ryan and hollered, and finally I see him standing up there at all the rubble, and he was alive. Incredible. Thank God we're all alive.
The Ebbinghoffs have a lot to be sad and thankful for. Nature has been both nasty and kind, but so too have been their fellow humans. Many friends and family have rallied to their aid and comfort, but other people have preyed upon their misfortune. Some of their scattered belongings have been looted in the night.
Some of the things that we can find, but I noticed somebody went in there already and picked up our encyclopedias, and they're all gone. I guess somebody must have broken in there last night. Not broken in, but just helped themselves with some of the stuff, and it's all gone.
This is all we've got left of our life, and we wish people would just leave it so that we can take what we've got left and try to start over again.
It will be hard for the Ebbinghoffs to start over again. Most of their material possessions have just disappeared in the wind. But start over they will. They do have themselves. The blow that fate dealt them Friday afternoon, though, may be enough to make them leave this place forever.
I think I'm gonna, from now on, I think I'll gonna move to BC, I think. My family wants to go there, and I think I'm gonna go there now. I don't know.
This is Bob Chelmick for 2-3 TV Eyewitness News.
Emergency crews still reeling from the aftermath of Friday's tornadoes had another scare early this morning. The Gibbons Fire Department was called to VLR Carriers. It's a propane transport company in the Sturgeon industrial area. The company's offices were ablaze, and when crews entered the building, they found a 40,000-liter propane tanker inside. Reinforcements from Nemeo and Fort Saskatchewan were called in. Luckily, the tanker was empty.
There was a propane tanker truck inside. We weren't sure whether it was full or empty. That can be a real concern when you have a fire like that. You don't know whether it's going to blow or just what's going to happen with it. Our main concern was trying to keep the fire down and cool the tanker as best we could until we got more personnel here to help us out.
What do you do when you walk into a fire and come in the door and find a 10,000-gallon tanker truck in there?
You really have to assess the situation, whether it's worth putting people's lives on the line just because of a tanker.
Continuing to cause problems in a different part of our province tonight. Campers in the Grand Prairie area are being told to strike their camps and go home because of flood alerts on 4 rivers. The Big Smoky and Simonette rivers are rising at a rate of 1/3 of a meter per hour. The Little Smoky and Wapiti rivers are also swelling, and the Tree Trunk Bridge over the Simonette River is in danger of washing out. That could leave some campers stranded. Wapiti is the only river close enough to the town of Grand Prairie to cause any problems, but luckily it is not a threat yet. The good news for the Grand Prairie area is that the rain should taper off tonight.
Neighborhoods wiped out by Friday's tornado in Edmonton, they've had to stop because there's no place to put any more. 26 people died, and the cost is as much as $75 million in losses. James McCawa was there today as survivors returned.
Today, work crews began restoring power lines, while others cleared tons of debris from more than 200 homes that were damaged or destroyed. Survivors returned to what was left of their homes.
So we got our lives, and we'll just have to pick up the pieces.
The Kean family sifted through the rubble of what was their home. One of many survivors still trying to understand why this happened.
I'm lucky. I'm one of the luckier ones. Friends of mine got killed, and it's hard.
Public response to this disaster has been overwhelming. So much food and clothing has come in that for the time being, people have been asked to stop giving. Warehouses are jammed. The problem now is distributing donations to those who need them. The Red Cross is helping place those left homeless by the storm, while the government has announced it will assist in providing new homes for the survivors of Friday's tornado. James McCawa, NBC.
Good evening. Another person has died from injuries sustained during Friday's tornado. That brings the death toll from the disaster to 26. Rescue workers are still searching through the wreckage, but officials say they don't expect to find any more bodies. An estimated 200 people have been injured. Many of them are still in hospital tonight. One of the areas hit hardest by the tornado was the Evergreen Trailer Park in the northeast corner of our city. 200 homes were destroyed by the twister, 15 people killed. Today, Kevin Tibbles has more.
Many of the parishioners from the St. John Bosco Church are now homeless. Today, they came to share the loss.
We mourn with the people in our city who have lost their lives and those who have suffered serious injury. God bless you.
While no one from this church died when massive tornadoes slammed into the northeast end of Edmonton, everyone suffered some form of loss or another. Today, Father Mike McCaffrey refers lightly to one couple from the church that managed to miss the twisters.
Connie and Joe Golding, who lost their mobile home, left early to help out with our parish bingo. So some good can even come from bingos.
No.
Out at the Evergreen Trailer Park, the shock is now setting in. Today, police accompanied families to the wreckage that once used to be their lives.
And I just yelled for the kids to come to me. They ran to me, and we were still standing by the kitchen door, trying to think of a way to get out. Like, I knew we couldn't go out the porch because it was already gone. We didn't know.
Today, Cyril Thompson, with his family, has returned to the spot where on Friday they were nearly killed.
And then my dad called us, and I don't remember what happened.
Today they are looking for the bits and pieces that are left, digging in the mud and the rubble.
Just the things that you can't replace because they're memories. Just something that the children maybe could find that was special of theirs. There's Sarah's baby bracelet. Right there beside the blue basin, it's her baby bracelet. Just things that, because they were here and they were so afraid, I wanted them to have something that just would make them feel a little more comfortable and safe.
The police were there to watch and keep record of everything taken. They want to ensure any surviving valuables are not lost or stolen.
Just to make sure that we have some control over what property has been removed from the premises, basically.
But some of the residents of this trailer park say they had to chase away looters, that some people arrived to treasure hunt shortly after the tragedy.
It was a table. I just picked the table right off my living room and just threw it out. I was so mad. How can people do that?
Some residents are angry for another reason. They're not being allowed to return to their homes. The police are telling them to wait.
And now they won't even let me go back into the trailer to look for my other dog to see if it's alive. You know, it doesn't make sense, you know.
Yesterday, this field was a sea of rubble, with firemen, soldiers, and other volunteers pouring over it looking for survivors. Now this field is a sea of mud. What happens when they're done is the bulldozers move in and push the rubble to the far end of the field, out of the way. They're all doing this in the constant drizzle that has been falling since the tornadoes hit last Friday. All the while, though, people talk of the miracles and the miracle workers. This policeman broke every traffic rule in the book, rushing a week-old baby to hospital. The child was found in the wreckage of its home.
I kept pulling the toes and trying to get the fingers moving. It kept grabbing a little bit, and every once in a while it would let out a whimper, and that's all I was concerned about, was that it was still making noise. It seemed pretty content right there, sitting on my lap in that blanket. It was warm.
The rest of the miracle workers continued to slug it out in the rain today, working round the clock, making sure everyone's got something to eat and a place to sleep. That in itself is a monstrous job. Kevin Tibble, CBC News at the Evergreen Trailer Park, Edmonton.
As we mentioned earlier, the tornado claimed a total of 26 lives. From the Evergreen Trailer Park, the dead are Jim Allen, Sharon Andruko, Merle Bain, Marie Barker, Lloyd Fankannel, Alfred and Etta Nolan, Graham Palmer, Kelly Pansell, Mary Putnam, and 4 members of one family, Diane, Darcy, Don, and Marvin Reimer. Another fatality from the trailer park, Patricia Robinson. The people killed in the southeast industrial area are Manuel Carrero, George Demetrius, Edward Derry, Ajmer Dalawal, Richard Gillespie, Grant Hartfile, Daniel Lewis, Edito Mendoza, Clement No, To Lee, and Gregory Trebinick. And our deepest sympathy goes out tonight to the family and friends of the 26 people killed. Since the tornado hit, donations of food and clothing and shelter have been pouring in, not just from Edmonton residents, but from surrounding communities like St. Albert and Warrenville, among others. So many people, in fact, have been so generous that the organization handling those donations, the Emergency Relief Services, has had to open up a second warehouse. As Kelly McClugan tells us tonight, the disaster has touched more than just those who were left homeless.
If this is the war zone, then this is where they rally the troops, the Edmonton branch of the Red Cross.
Haven't got time to eat.
Half-empty coffee cups and cigarette butts tell the whole story. The donuts still sit on the plate. There's just no time to eat them. It has now been 48 hours since the tornado hit Edmonton, but still the phone lines at the Red Cross are lit up constantly. Calls from families that have been split up. And because the phone circuits into this city have been jammed, anxious relatives call from all over the world, wanting to know if loved ones are alive, or injured, or what.
Have you heard from them yet? Right, and we haven't either, so we, as soon as we do, we'll give you a call. Okay, so just hang tight.
In a tiny room on the 3rd floor, ham radio operators keep in touch with their colleagues, taking requests for information that come from all over the world.
Roger, it'll be 6 Bravo Alpha Charlie, Bruce.
Down the hall, volunteers man 10 phone lines, taking between 200 to 300 calls every hour.
Byers Transport in that area was severely damaged. If he was working for Byers, then he may well have been injured.
Most of these volunteers are members of a service group, the Lions Club. They do this sort of thing a lot. But Carol Newman has never volunteered for anything before. She finds that dealing with people is easy. Dealing with their emotions is a lot tougher.
Because they just want to hear something. They want to hear reassurance. And I try to reassure them, but, like when people call about, the hit areas like Evergreen and that, I don't say too much because you don't know.
But they try to find out. They take down names, addresses, any information that might help. And most of the time, the news is good.
It's a great joy to tell them that their family is okay, that there's nothing to worry about.
While the Red Cross tries to put families back together, survivors line up at emergency relief services trying to put their lives back together. And they have a lot of help. This warehouse is 4,000 square feet in size, and there's not many square feet to spare. Everywhere, boxes filled with clothing, food, you name it. Donations by the semi-trailer load. And so too have come the hundreds of volunteers. Volunteers who seem to sense the urgency of the need, but who still take the time to fold that shirt as if it were their own.
I feel the families have gone through so much, and they're taking that little extra time so that the things that we can give them look nice. Because all they've got to look at when they go to their homes is 2 feet of rubble. And it's so disheartening. They've lost everything. They're cut up, they're scratched, they're bruised, and at least we can give them something that looks nice, and that really, I think, means a lot.
Means a lot to people like Rick and Dorothy Letourneau. When we took them into the back of this warehouse to show them just how much had been donated, they were speechless.
Can you believe this?
No. Just people are just being so good.
When the tornado first hit, this city was stunned. Things like this happened in places like Oklahoma, Texas, even Barrie, Ontario. People just couldn't believe it had happened here. And now what they can't believe is the response. As one volunteer put it, it's that small town spirit of giving, of pitching in, alive and well right here in the big city. Kelly McLugan, CBC News, Edmonton.
The Edmonton Emergency Relief Service has taken just about all the donations it can handle for the moment, but they still need large-size clothing for adults. They could also use clothes, racks, and hangers. The main emergency relief center is located at 10820 119th Street. You can see the address on the screen. And the other is at Kingsway and 116th Street. Now, both those centers are open from 8 a.m. until midnight, and they still need cardboard boxes as well, and they need the boxes to store the goods in. And, of course, the volunteers then have to help sort it all out. Well, all the figures aren't in yet, but officials estimate that the disaster caused $100 million worth of damage. Today, homeowners and businessmen were surveying that damage, trying to salvage whatever they could. Paul Adams reports.
Sunday morning on the August-long weekend. This is Clairview in northeast Edmonton. Most of the people here would normally be out at the lake or in the mountains today. Instead, they're rooting around in the wreckage of what used to be pleasant suburban homes. The family that used to live here had just left for Ontario on vacation when the tornado struck. The owner, Burke McDonald, is coming back this evening. Today, relatives and friends are trying to sort out the mess.
Look out for the door!
Friends and family, basically, just to get out what we can. There's not much left, but
looking up in these skies, you never know when the rains could start again, and it's a fairly new home and fairly new appliances, and we thought if we could store them in a safe place until he got back home, and then he could make a decision at that time in terms of what he wants to do.
The men working on the roof are paid by the insurance company. They're throwing up temporary shelter to protect what remains of the house. In the kitchen, relatives are sorting through shelves, looking for what's left.
Okay, we're coming to the steps. Okay, so
down what used to be the hallway, they're hauling out the fridge. They're planning to store it in somebody's garage. A few blocks away, Mike Bradley just had a chat with his insurance adjuster. Bradley's home is completely leveled, and the insurance man says there's nothing much worth salvaging.
The big thing is to try to get as much protected as possible, and again, you know, have people salvage as much of their property and protect their houses from any further damage. This one's an extreme case. The house is gone, but in a lot of cases you have houses where their roofs are partially missing and things like that, and we have crews out covering up the roofs and trying to protect the balance of the house from any additional damage.
But Bradley's sifting through the ruins anyway, and he's got some help today from Frank Rickman. Frank Rickman had never met Mike Bradley before today.
There's 2 or 3 neighbors here, then there's another two or three who just showed up. They showed up yesterday. There were strangers who volunteered, and they're back here today. It's been great that they've been doing that.
We're close to them. We're in the neighborhood, and I don't know, if my house had something like this done to it, I would sure hope people would come by and help us out too. So.
In total, about 400 families were left homeless by Friday's tornado. The insurance industry estimates the total damage will eventually exceed $100 million. But no one knows for sure. While the job of estimating the damage to private homes is well underway, in the industrial area of Sherwood Park, the job has barely begun. This afternoon, crews were still working on a search and rescue operation. They're searching for bodies and checking to make sure there's no dangerous waste strewn by the tornado. People who work in the devastated industrial area won't be allowed in before Monday. That's how long the preliminary cleanup is going to take. This afternoon, the government announced that it will be opening a number of victims' assistance centers starting tomorrow. The centers will coordinate the relief effort for homeowners, businessmen, and families who were victimized by Friday's tornado. Paul Adams, CBC News, Edmonton.
As Paul just mentioned, victims' assistance centers have been set up. The assistance center in Edmonton opens up tomorrow at M.E. Lazert School. And there's the address, 6804 144th Avenue. It'll be open from 10 in the morning until 9 at night, and the number is 423-4554. Officers from Alberta Mortgage and Housing, as well as Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, will be on hand to help solve the housing problems. Industry insurance people will be there as well. They'll be handing out advances on claims, and you can also make arrangements for things like government checks, workers' compensation, and so on. There will also be counseling services. Now, a similar center is going to open up at the Strathcona County office in Sherwood Park on Tuesday. The number there is 464-8111, and there's another one. The Leduc County office will help take information about farm losses. That's on Tuesday as well, and they can be reached at 986-2251. In the meantime, the provincial government says that tornado victims will be allowed to live rent-free for 1 month in government-owned housing. Right now, the majority of the 400 homeless are being put up in hotels. Just now, we'd like to look back for a moment. We have a map to show you tonight of the path that the tornado took on Friday and the damage that it caused. The tornado was first sighted in the southeast section of the city around Leduc-Beaumont. It passed through Mill Woods and then into the city's green belt, heading for the industrial area, then north through Refinery Row, passing out through the northeast section, the Evergreen Trailer Park, and Clairview. Tornadoes are measured like earthquakes on a very specific scale according to things like wind velocity and the kind of damage caused. The scale is called a Fujita F scale. It measures from F0 to F5, from least to most severe. We can't tell yet just how strong this tornado was, but it was likely a combination. F0 has winds of between 64 and 115 kilometers an hour. It will uproot trees and bend TV antennae. F1, the winds are stronger. Parts of houses could be stripped off. When a tornado moves into F2, porches can be ripped off and cottages completely rolled over. At F3, a tornado carries winds up to 333 kilometers an hour. Cars can be moved or upset. Unanchored two-story houses lifted from their foundations, and house trailers can be completely demolished. At F4, cars are carried through the air, and concrete silos, for example, can be knocked over. Winds can hit up to 416 kilometers an hour. At F5, with winds over 500 kilometers an hour, little remains intact. Mayor Lawrence Decore wants to review, meanwhile, of Alberta's weather office. He maintains the city didn't get enough warning of the approaching tornado. Today, the mayor went back to the Evergreen Trailer Park. And when he went back, of course, he met with police and emergency personnel at the site. Decore says that he feels the cleanup is going well.
The police have just informed me that the services are coming on stream. The whole of the trailer park, roughly half of the area to the north, is being restored, and people will soon be allowed, if they're not already in, to go back into their premises. Gas is on, electricity's on, everything's there like it was before. So we're moving very quickly.
How long will it be before we see some of that relief money we've been hearing about?
Well, I haven't even given that any thought. Our concern is to deal with people right now and to look after their immediate needs, clothing and food and so on. Monies are pouring in, and those monies have been going to the Red Cross. Everything that's come to City Hall has been given to the Red Cross.
How much?
Oh, I have no idea. I know that people have been bringing 1,000, 2,000, whatever I know 2,000 and 1,000 situations, but I haven't monitored that closely.
Just give me an idea of what sort of context we're in almost 48 hours after all this happened.
I think that another day and we'll all start to wind down out of this whole tragedy.
Where will we be then?
Well, it'll be a much more measured response. More people will be getting away from here. City service people will be getting away. Cleanup will start. The sort of things that you'd expect after something like this.
There is more news still ahead. This News Final. Stay with us.
From the very first that we've been turned away, I was here on Friday night looking for stuff, and I found parts of my deck and stuff that I figured I could rebuild. Since then, it's been hauled away. My car was sitting over there, and it's been hauled away. I could have collected belongings that we found and put it in the trunk of my car or something, and I would have gathered everything on my lot. Instead, they've bulldozed everything.
Our immediate concern was the concern of the public. Were there people under that debris? Was there somebody injured or somebody that was dead or dying? So the order that I gave when we had the local emergency was to take anything apart that had to be taken apart to save people.
Just a short distance from the trailer park is St. John Bosco Parish. That was the site for a very emotional service today. People came to mourn a great loss and to seek comfort.
This is the St. John Bosco Parish. It is nearby the Evergreen Trailer Park. It is nearby this Clairview neighborhood. For many residents of these communities, the parish is a place of spiritual support.
We try to understand what has happened.
Lori Sawatsky, crying and her head bowed through most of the service. Herself not a disaster victim, but here praying for a close friend who lost everything. Debbie Froh, her home badly damaged by the storm, but here providing music for the service.
I think over the next while, I'm going to have a lot of problems every time I see a dark cloud and every time the wind comes up.
For Father Mike McCaffery, this is a time of grief and especially worry.
I think you go through a bit of a grief and wondering about your own parishioners and own members of the community and whether they're alive or dead or whether they're in pain or whether they're injured. And So I think a lot of people are like that.
But many people, still in shock from the extent of the devastation, are just trying to rebuild their homes, rebuild their lives. But even in the midst of this destruction, there is occasional cause for rejoicing. When the storm hit this now destroyed home, a 3.5-month-old baby was torn from his crib and buried under rubble. The mother, Mary Grandish, managed to free herself from the collapsed wreckage and locate her son.
So I was very, very happy, very. And he's got a little crack in his skull, but doctor says it'll be okay.
And the family that once called this location home were all away when the storm hit. The family cat was in the house, but it did survive. Relatives are helping Bill Oliver to tear down and sort through what's left of the house. But really, everything the family owned is now destroyed.
It's, you know, every time you talk about it, you get very emotional. It's just unbelievable. It's hard to talk about. But you have to go on, so we just right now trying to straighten everything up and see what we can salvage, if anything, and start over.
There will come a time when all this devastation is cleared away and the homes are rebuilt. Hopefully there will come a time when all the physical injuries are mended. But the emotional scars from this disaster may never completely heal.
We'll take a break now and be back in just a couple of minutes. Comments today from the provincial government as the post-disaster aid plan started to take shape.
We're not going to be legalistic. We are not going to be rigid, attempting to follow any rules. You've heard what Premier Getty said about it. Our primary aim is to get these people back in the full stream of living, get on with living their lives, and getting over what has happened to them and their families.
That's the basic philosophy of the government's aid package. No limit has been set on what will be spent. There haven't even been any negotiations about how the federal, provincial, and local governments will share the cost. A Victims Assistance Center will open at the Emmy Lazert High School tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to start the ball rolling. And it will be open every day from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. as long as it's needed. There, victims will be able to register their losses, apply for immediate housing assistance. Those displaced will be offered accommodation in vacant homes owned by the Alberta Home Mortgage Corporation and the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. The first month will be free. After that, longer-term rental or even purchase options are available. And they'll be able to get cash advances to help with refurnishing homes, arrange for food and clothing supplies from the massive stocks donated, arrange for emergency aid from social services, unemployment insurance, and workers' compensation, get help with cleanup, arrange for delivery of federal and provincial pension and allowance checks, and arrange for psychological counseling, a lesson learned in the wake of the Barrie tornado disaster of 1985.
The indications we have from Barrie are that the earlier the intervention is available, the more effective it is. Some of the counseling will be from volunteer groups who have got experience in this, such as the Salvation Army, Red Cross people. Some will be available from community mental health services, the nurses with the public health authorities, psychologists, and if need be, psychiatrists. The vast majority of people will not need psychiatric treatment, but people who've got an underlying emotional problem, it may be brought out by this and stimulate the need for ongoing psychiatric treatment. But for most people, it's a matter of assisting them with making the emotional adjustments that are needed after something like this.
Well, some of the symptoms, some of the things that are likely to happen is, as I say, a dramatic, almost reliving the experience. It's almost like they're going through it again. They get depressed, very anxious, and very, very fearful that this is going to happen again, and they believe it. You know, it's like living a nightmare once again.
As well, a special aid center will also be established at the Strathcona County offices in Sherwood Park for employees and employers. That center will specialize in the problems faced by businesses and workers devastated on Friday, including registration of losses, unemployment and workers' compensation claims, rebuilding assistance, and once again, counseling for the stress and trauma of Friday's unthinkable reality. Christopher Dean, 2-3 TV Eyewitness News.
In times of crisis, the first and most recognizable symbol to be seen is the Red Cross. Since Friday evening, the emergency service branch of the Red Cross has played a very critical role.
Perhaps someday an accurate count will be made of the hundreds of people who volunteered their time during the tornado disaster in Edmonton. Certainly they must number in the thousands, dozens of whom are manning telephones and radios in an attempt to trace Edmontonians being sought by families and friends outside the area.
To date, we have processed approximately 7,000 calls since the tornado hit on Friday. And the calls are continuously coming in. Our switchboard is lit up like a Christmas tree.
Okay. You have some advice to Edmontonians, whether they were living in the area that was affected or not.
Yes, in terms of people that have been affected in Edmonton, if they could contact relatives that may be concerned about their welfare, if they could attempt to contact their family members and indicate to them that they are safe and sound, it would take some of the pressure off of the calls that are coming into the Red Cross and give our people some relief.
So in fact you're talking about people with family out of the province?
That's correct. And that could be anywhere in the world, because we're receiving phone calls from Spain, France, Germany, England, and so on. So they're not just solely confined to people that are in Canada.
Mark Pulishy, 2-3 TV, Eyewitness News.
Throughout this disaster, there have been many stories of close calls, great losses, and a little of both. Bob Chelmick has this report about a family that experienced a little of both. Their possessions were destroyed, but their lives were spared.
Young Ryan Ebbinghoff surveys what's left of his family's home on an acreage on the outskirts of southeast Edmonton. His is one of the lucky stories of the terrible 2 hours Friday afternoon. The full force of nature pointed down from the skies, picked up his house, and threw it away. Ryan was in it at the time.
I was just reading some mail, and I felt the wind coming through my house so hard that my ears were popping. And I got up to check outside what was happening, and we have about 7-8 buildings on the property, and they were all just being torn down by the wind.
At that moment, Ryan's father was watching in horror from just down the road.
I was sitting with my vehicle over there and looking through the window, knowing that Ryan was in there, but I could see the house going up about 10 feet, turning around, and with a tremendous velocity moving over there in that direction, and that's where it ended up, right over there in all the rubble.
And then, just like that, I went out of the window and started rolling into my lawn, and I started getting hit with debris and stuff in the storm.
You were sucked out of the window?
Yeah, with the rest of the house.
Did you feel like you were getting pulled up into the air?
Yeah, I got pulled out, and then I just was blowing along the ground just like a piece of gravel.
And Ryan ended up right here in the brushes, right over there. So I just ran right across here and hollered for Ryan and hollered, and finally I see him standing up there at all the rubble, and he was alive. Incredible. Thank God we're all alive.
The Ebbinghoffs have a lot to be sad and thankful for. Nature has been both nasty and kind, but so too have been their fellow humans. Many friends and family have rallied to their aid and comfort, but other people have preyed upon their misfortune. Some of their scattered belongings have been looted in the night.
Some of the things that we can find, but I noticed somebody went in there already and picked up our encyclopedias, and they're all gone. I guess somebody must have broken in there last night. Not broken in, but just helped himself with some of the stuff, and it's all gone.
This is all we've got left of our life, and we wish people would just leave it so that we can take what we've got left and try to start over again.
It will be hard for the Ebbinghoffs to start over again. Most of their material possessions have just disappeared in the wind. But start over they will. They do have themselves. The blow that fate dealt them Friday afternoon, though, may be enough to make them leave this place forever.
I think I'm gonna, from now on, I think I'll gonna move to BC, I think. My family wants to go there, and I think I'm gonna go there now. I don't know.
This is Bob Chelmick for 2-3 TV Eyewitness News.
We'll take a 2-minute break and be back with some of the other news from today. Stay with us. The rain-swollen Simonette River is responsible for washing out the tree trunk bridge today. Luckily, all of the campers in the area were evacuated before the washout. Had they not been, they would have been stranded. 3 other rivers are also starting to overflow, the Big and Little Smoky Rivers plus the Wapiti. Officials expect the peak of the flooding to hit early tomorrow. The rain should be tapering off, though, overnight. Back here in Edmonton, emergency crews still reeling from the aftermath of Friday's disaster had yet another scare early this morning. The Gibbons Fire Department was called to VLR Carriers, a propane transport company in the Sturgeon industrial area. The company's offices were ablaze, and when crews entered the building, they found a 40,000-liter propane tanker inside. Reinforcements from Nemeo and Fort Saskatchewan were called in. Luckily, though, the tanker turned out to be empty.
It was a propane tanker truck inside. We weren't sure whether it was full or empty. That can be a real concern when you have a fire like that. You don't know whether it's going to blow or just what's going to happen with it. Our main concern was trying to keep the fire down and cool the tanker as best we could until we got more personnel here to help us out.
What do you do when you walk into a fire and come in the door and find a 10,000-gallon tanker truck in there?
You really have to assess the situation, whether it's worth putting people's lives on the line just because of a tanker.
Some people were more fortunate. This woman's mobile home is still standing, although there is a fair amount of damage inside.
Well, there's holes in the ceiling, so it's just nailing down some board on top of it just to keep the rain from getting in. Well, there's beams came through the ceiling, you know, parts of other trailers.
The bizarre nature of a tornado could be seen in what was and wasn't left. Toys were intact, but trailers weren't. Heavy appliances didn't survive, but sewing machines and china did. Although many people desperately wanted to salvage as much as they could, others didn't even bother.
There's nothing there. I found where the trailer was. I found my bathroom taps. That's it. Nothing else. I've got absolutely zero.
So are you going back to the site?
Why would I go back? What for?
What was your financial situation as far as the trailer went?
Only 10 payments left to pay it off. So I was maybe thinking of buying a piece of land to put the mobile on or trading it off for a house, because I upkept the trailer as much as I could, painting and cleaning, and anything broke down it'd be new, and I'd done my bathroom, put new taps all over the place, and I built a bar, you know, hand-built bar stools and everything like that. Antique stuff in my bedroom. Nothing is there. I couldn't believe it. Just the ground.
What would you like to see the government do now? What do you need from the government in terms of financial help?
Well, I need a home. I want my home. That's, you know. Hopefully, maybe the government might step in and help people out.
The province has assured the tornado victims they won't have to worry about money. Premier Don Getty says their homes will be restored and that the dollars will be there to help them. And the Insurance Bureau of Canada says homeowners can expect to recover most of the damage cost. That tornadoes are considered windstorms and not acts of God. Edmonton's Mayor Lawrence Decore says a quicker warning from weather forecasters might have helped people get away from the twister. Now, he is calling for a review of weather reporting procedures to see if it could have been speeded up at all, if people could have been given an earlier warning. Dan, how early can the weather office give warnings to people that a tornado is on its way?
Well, this is one of the big problems, Carolyn. It's a problem not just in Alberta, it's a problem in tornado parts of the world. In the U.S. Midwest, where I did live for a year, they have people that are employed to scan the skies during the season. They have tornado watches all the time. They have constant advisories on radio and television. And still, these things are one of the most unpredictable freaks of nature. They can come at any time, almost under any conditions. They usually require humid air and thunderstorms. But if you were to have a tornado watch every time you had those conditions, you'd have one every day.
Now, Dan, Edmonton isn't known as tornado country. Why would this area be hit? Is there any explanation?
Well, it's a freak occurrence. Northeasterly winds apparently brought up the humid air out of the Gulf Stream. But it's a freak for many reasons. One, you don't get tornadoes in the Edmonton area very often, or in Alberta. Secondly, you don't get one of this size. It was 1 kilometer wide. I mean, that's unbelievable size, even for parts of the world that get tornadoes. And thirdly, it stayed on the ground for 10 minutes. Tornadoes tend to bounce. They hit the ground shortly for seconds, they leave, then they go sideways. It doesn't matter where.
Dan, can I actually take you back to this business about predicting? Weather officials say you can't really predict a tornado. Why is that?
Well, because they don't exactly know why they happen, and you can't read them on radar. Sometimes you can, and you often get funnel clouds created by thunderstorm activity, but they don't often hit the ground.
Okay, but I take it until it actually hits the ground, it's not officially a tornado.
That's when it becomes a tornado.
Okay. Is there much resentment, Carolyn, in Edmonton to the fact that they weren't given sufficient warning?
We didn't hear any whatsoever, Norm. I think people are pretty resigned to the fact that it is just one of those things that happens. As Dan was saying, it is a freak kind of situation, and people are actually treating it with a fair amount of humor given the circumstances. One gentleman said to me he was looking around what was left of his trailer home, and it was absolutely nothing. And he just shrugged, he looked at me, and he said, well, my family is okay, and we needed new furniture anyway.
Yeah.
So that's how they're responding to it.
Dan, you said you lived in a part of the States where they had tornadoes regularly. Did you ever see one, actually see a tornado?
No, I did not see one, but in the town that I was living, tornadoes jumped right over top of the town. They landed on one side, they hit a trailer park on the far side. The sky was maroon and the winds were going by. It looked like an animated sky, and you could hear the noise. It's truly phenomenal.
And out here in Edmonton, there's been a black cloud basically hovering over the city over the weekend. What does that mean? Is that going to go away? Does that mean more bad weather is on the way?
Well, you're supposed to be getting some sunshine later today.
Oh, I hope so.
I've got to stop you both there. We'll continue talking with Carolyn in Edmonton later this morning. It's 19.5 past the hour.
Friday and Saturday, but yesterday I just...
It is a common thread that binds many of the victims. Only now is it possible for many of them to start dealing with this incredible tragedy. So far, trying to pick up the pieces has been the priority.
When I was walking through the Clearview area, I saw a lot of our parishioners, and I told them that we were having a service today, and they said, well, you know, we're glad to hear that you're praying for us, but we just have to deal with this mess.
St. John Bosco Parish was not filled to the rafters this morning. It was probably 3/4 full. Possibly more time is needed before the victims can let themselves grieve.
All kinds of reasons for coming here this morning. I want to come to give thanks. I'm alive. Some of my friends have gone to God. I want to wonder why them and not me.
Let us pray for all those who have suffered physical, emotional, and spiritual pain. May the compassionate Lord heal them. For this, let us pray to the Lord.
Lord, hear our prayer.
We pray for
It is the 26 people who died that Jeanette Kusher prays for most, knowing that she was close to that same fate.
I just pray for the people in Evergreen because they have so much less than we do.
An ecumenical service will be held Thursday night at 7 o'clock in the Convention Center. Daryl McIntyre, 2-3 TV Eyewitness News.
Victims of Friday's disaster took another small step toward getting their lives back in order today, aided by the Special Victim Assistance Center at Emmy Lizard High School. Some victims who started the day with virtually nothing finished the day with new clothes, new furniture, and a new place to live.
The object of the center is, in effect, to provide one-stop shopping for the victims of the disaster. For the first time in the history of disaster relief in North America, officials have tried to put all possible agencies together in one spot. The plan is to provide the help from those agencies coupled with volunteer assistance and a minimum of paperwork to get the people into the aid process and out again with a minimum of fuss.
They'll walk out, hopefully, with all their immediate needs looked after, whether they be housing, financial assistance, clothing, any of the benefits that come through unemployment insurance, survivors' benefits through the health and welfare. We hope we've got the spectrum of services covered. What they'll also have are contacts for tomorrow and the next day and from there on, so that they'll know exactly who they're dealing with.
Before the doors opened at 10 this morning, agency reps and volunteer aides had a last-minute briefing to polish up a hastily assembled but already very well-organized relief system.
If there's nothing more, let's go get them.
Right at opening time, Albert Fadoon and Sherry Boss, both victims of the Evergreen tornado, arrived. After registration, Albert and Sherry embarked on a multi-stop tour of the center, designed to handle their every need from insurance claims to finding new furniture and a new place to live.
Okay, can I just get this? There's going to be no charge for the first month. And after that time, if you stay, we'll have someone contact you, one of the rental agents, and they'll make all of the usual arrangements, which would be a rent from anywhere, say, $450 to $550, and a damage deposit and that sort of thing. You can stay for a short period of time or as long a period of time as you want.
It took only minutes for Sherry and Albert to be assigned to a new home, a two-bedroom apartment in Clairview. Ironically, the couple moved from Clairview to the Evergreen site on June 10th. Today, they moved back where they started. And again, within minutes, they had met the rental agent and been shown their new, perhaps temporary, home.
I got my door and your key, and you're in the
So now we do have a place.
Now you have a place. That sounds great. Well, I hope the best of us.
You too?
Be happy with us. I gotta run again. I got some more I gotta get.
I know you're busy.
Keep going here, sir. Yeah, so you watched the whole building here. I got the whole building here, Fred. Great, thanks. Son.
Okay. Now you start to cry?
The center which helped Sherry and Albert today will be open from 10 in the morning to 9 at night every day as long as it's needed. It's located at Emmy Lazert High School, 6804 144th Avenue. Information about the center can be obtained by calling 423-4554. Christopher Dean, 23 TV Eyewitness News.
The owners and employees of businesses in the Sherwood Industrial Park were given the go-ahead today to salvage the remains of what used to be a very active business community.
It's been 3 days since the lethal tornado struck, and for the first time since, these business people are surveying the damage done by the storm. Because of the dangers posed by leaking gas and toxic chemicals, the County of Strathcona waited until noon today to give permission to employers and their workers to come into the area. Well over 100 people passed through the RCMP lines, salvaging what they could and shaking their heads with disbelief.
This is going to be hard on us. Especially us, we just finished moving and we got bills up the yin-yang now.
It's going to take a lot more on behalf of our competitors than to send a tornado down us to stop us. We're ready to go. Tomorrow morning we've got work to do. My dad did work the next morning, and you know, we'll bounce back. It's going to take more than a tornado to stop us.
This gentleman was at the lake when the twister struck. He rents this space and doesn't know if it's covered by insurance.
We really don't know if we've got insurance, even contents in this place. Because we rented the building, we don't know until we see our adjuster.
Fortunately, the employees who work at many of the businesses here were allowed to go home early Friday. Otherwise, the task of cleaning up the twisted metal and crushed concrete would be much more grim. Susan Amarongan, 2-3 TV Eyewitness News.
Federal Employment Minister Benoit Bouchard says special help will be given from his department in Ottawa through the unemployed. Bouchard says any person who is currently unemployed and who helps in the cleanup will not lose their insurance benefits. Bouchard realizes that anyone helping out in this tornado aftermath cannot also be actively searching for a full-time job. As well, special employment programs will be considered by Ottawa after Bouchard gets a report from the Deputy Prime Minister Don Mazankowski, who's still here in Edmonton.
The Insurance Bureau of Canada is warning about unscrupulous contractors who are taking advantage of those who lost their homes or had them badly damaged in the tornado. The Bureau says there are a few contractors going from home to home saying that the insurance company sent them to do repairs. The Bureau says homeowners should not listen to these people and should only arrange for emergency repairs until they have talked with their insurance agent or company directly. A spokesman for the Insurance Bureau said he suspects there are a lot of people in the roofing business today who weren't in the business yesterday.
Some of the victims today returned to the Evergreen mobile home trailer park in northeast Edmonton for the first time since Friday's nightmare. And they say picking up the pieces of their lives is a heart-wrenching job that can only be understood by those who have also been through a similar tragedy.
Every half hour, a bus arrives in the Evergreen mobile home park carrying victims of Friday's killer tornado. They deboard, register with the police, and are then escorted to what's left of their homes, where they attempt to piece together their shattered lives.
To go through this is something I never want to go through again, as long as I live, and it's just, what can you say about something that's just ripped away from you? I mean, and you feel so helpless. Helpless that I wasn't there with my family. I was helpless. I feel helpless that there's nothing I could do to restore any of this, to save any of this. There's no way you can combat nature like that. There's no way you can be prepared.
John Crimes was driving home when the tornado swept through the park and destroyed his house. His wife and children were inside. While his two daughters are with him today, his wife is in hospital with a severed spine, a fractured skull, and numerous broken bones and cuts. A sister-in-law and family friend have also joined Crimes today for his first visit back home.
I just couldn't face it. I tried to come out here a couple times and I couldn't. And even now it's just all coming back. You know, I look at the wreck and the carnage, and I just thank the God that my family came through it. Where were you for all this?
I was by the TV and that. There was a TV, not no more.
I just can't believe this, you know. I mean, you see it on television, you hear it in the news, and you feel for the people, but you know what I mean, you just can't feel because you haven't experienced it. But you see something like this, just totally. I mean, like I was saying to my sister-in-law, you know, we've been married now for 13 years, and we've got a few pictures.
We did not know what was happening or going on, and the worst part was if my sister and my mom were alive or not.
Sifting through the rubble, Crimes counts his blessings. His family survived. 15 other people in the park didn't. And while he feels for the less fortunate, he still finds it hard to accept the fact that he's lost some treasured possessions forever.
It's just like a whole part of my life's been ripped away. There's nothing. I mean, I got my family, praise the Lord for that, but everything else is gone. I mean, it's not just a simple matter of replacing a home, but it's everything that was within it. You know, the memories. We've had some deaths in our family, and their things were passed on to us. I mean, how do you replace it?
After less than an hour, Crimes leaves, probably never to come back. He says there's just too many memories here, representing too much loss for him, his children, and especially his wife.
I mean, you can heal her and you can fix up her body, but you're not going to take those memories away, and those fears and those anxieties. To have, you know, to close your eyes and to see it every time you close your eyes, you almost don't want to sleep anymore. We're all facing it right now.
Steve Hogle, 2-3 TV, Eyewitness News.
The aftermath is presenting all sorts of dangerous problems for the fire department. This morning, firefighters discovered 3 propane tanks leaking underneath some rubble in the southeastern part of the city. While the dangerous goods team hauled them away without incident, the firemen also discovered a container leaking the poison chemical 2,4-D. A spokesman says they have to take special precautions as they don't know what they're going to come across next. Meanwhile, power has been restored to all parts of the city except for 2 small industrial areas in the southeast.
Well, it will be weeks before all the stories are told from Black Friday, but today we learn of a strange coincidence from China. Our sister city of Harbin has also been hit by a tornado. The twister struck Harbin on the very same day ours hit. In Harbin, 16 people were killed and 1,800 people left homeless, almost the same magnitude of disaster. Today, the mayors of both cities exchanged telegrams expressing deep sorrow for each community's loss in the tragic and coincidental tornadoes. Edmonton and her sister city of Harbin also both experienced flooding last summer and forest fires earlier this year.
Mother Nature is also creating problems in the Peace River region. The same storm that spawned Friday's tornadoes in Edmonton brought heavy rain to that area, and that has resulted in extreme flooding.
This is the Simonette River near Grand Prairie, and this was the crossing for the Forestry Trunk Road. A nearby campground has been virtually destroyed by the flooding, and a handful of farms remain under several meters of water. The town of Peace River is also on alert, with the waterway there expected to crest 5 meters above normal. At the town of Watino, 60 kilometers south of Peace River, Highway 49 is under nearly a half a meter of water. As well, the Smoky River has jumped its banks, and the Little Smoky and Wapiti rivers are near flood stage. Flooding is also a concern in one part of Edmonton, but for a somewhat different reason. Under this street at 108th Avenue and 111th Street, a water main ruptured. There's been no damage to homes. Lawrence Herzog, 2-3 TV, Eyewitness News.
5 American advertising executives from New York were killed in a whitewater rafting accident in BC over this past weekend. The bodies are now in Vancouver awaiting autopsies. The accident occurred in Lava Canyon, where the water is described as the wildest whitewater around. The raft was carrying 11 Americans and guide Ron Thompson when it tipped sideways and tossed all but one of the men into the swollen river. The raft was pushed onto its side by a boulder in the water.
First to the Evergreen Trailer Park, which was ripped apart on Friday night by several tornadoes. 15 people died at the park. Another 11 people were killed in other parts of Edmonton. Damage has been estimated at $150 million, but the total is expected to go higher. And as Keith Vogue reports, the trailer park survivors are under a terrible emotional strain.
For the first time since Friday, there was sunshine in Edmonton, and it seemed to help. To lift spirits, if only a little.
There's a washer or something here. Heater.
This is the 3rd straight day of clawing around in the rubble at the Evergreen Trailer Park. As each day passes, the enormity of the disaster seems to sink in deeper. People are beginning to realize there are nightmares locked inside them, that they may relive this horror for months, even years.
The more I think of it, though, it's just like I've never been this scared ever. Like, you know, I mean, it's inside the trailer, there's nothing you could do. It's like something out there is coming to get you.
Some call it the Vietnam syndrome. Psychologists call it post-traumatic stress disorder.
It's almost like having a flashback to the experience. It's that real for them. That's pretty scary. It's like having a nightmare that you are, you know, that is real as the experience itself.
The question for many now is, do they want to rebuild their lives here?
Yeah, we'd live here again. I think so.
Not everyone feels that way. At this Victim Assistance Center, people plug into the system that will get them through the next few weeks. But some say after that, they'll just collect their insurance money and get far away.
Get a few things out of there and throw a match in there, whatever, I don't know. There's nothing there for me as far as I'm concerned.
The whole business of figuring out what the tornadoes mean in dollars and cents is up to the insurance adjusters. They swarmed all over the trailer park site today, taking pictures, making notes.
And we want to help you to make sure that you get the most buzz for the buck, you might say.
Okay.
So that you are put back to your previous loss condition as quickly as possible.
At the industrial park, another hard-hit site, business owners were counting their losses. Thousands of people work here. The largest employer, Stelco, says there will be layoffs. The union fears the layoffs will number into the hundreds. But other businesses say their employees are well protected.
We're fully insured for loss of for business interruption insurance, so there's absolutely no problem that way. Our people will be paid right through this, whether we're using them on the cleanup or not.
2 cases, put them in that empty room.
If there is a happy story in any of this, it's the relief effort. There are 5,000 volunteers, and so much food has been donated there's no longer room for it. This is just some of what people have given in only 3 days. Still, the question is, will it be enough? Keith Vogue, CBC News, Edmonton.
Families are putting their homes and their lives back together. The tornado story coming up on The Journal.
Winds of hell.
Tonight, in-depth coverage of the disaster that struck Edmonton, the killer tornado. We look at the damage it's caused and the lives it's changed. The Journal with Bill Cameron and Paul Griffin.
Canadians don't often get the world's worst weather. Hurricanes, tornadoes, cyclones usually strike somewhere far away. That's part of the reason Friday's tornado in Edmonton has shocked the whole country. If it can happen in Alberta, where it has almost never happened before, very few places in Canada seem safe.
Today, the sun finally came out in Edmonton, and Friday's victims began to come to terms with the disaster. The process of recovery and rebuilding is now underway. To begin our coverage tonight, the Journal's Susan Harada has this profile of one family, what they've endured, and where they go from here.
From the moment the tornado touched down for the last time on its deadly journey across their city, the people of Edmonton have been hard at work. Finding the dead, comforting the living.
I lost my son 7 months ago today, and now I gotta find my other one.
It's a long, painful task they face, putting their lives back in order. For August Ebbinghoff and his family, that means first, saving whatever can be saved of their past. 20 years of their lives together, gone. And when this is all that's left, it's the little things, small reminders of who they were and what they had just 4 days ago that mean the most to them.
That's it. Yeah, that's from Miguel, is it? Yeah. Give me that.
The family of 4 lived in a bungalow in the southeastern section of the city. It was one of the first areas the tornado hit, and it got hit hard. Ebbinghoff and his 16-year-old son Ryan were the only ones home at the time.
Tore down all these electric power lines, moved back here again, then I moved directly over the house here, and the next thing I knew, I was parked over there with my vehicle and picked up the house. My son was in it, and I threw the house 150 yards away from its foundation.
Okay, I was shot out from the window there. I was blown and I rolled along the lawn here. I landed in the shrubs in here, and I was hit with debris from the house, so I stayed down.
And all of a sudden I see him walking out there. It was all dirty and muddy and had blood coming from his, but he walked out alive.
Stories such as this family's have been told and retold throughout the city over the past few days. They are the miracles, the truly amazing stories that have given the people here hope. And hope is all that some people have left because so much has been lost, especially in this trailer park in the northeast end of the city. This is one of the worst hit areas. It's where dozens of homes were blown to bits and hundreds of people were injured. And most of those who lost their lives in this tornado lost their lives here. What's left of the Evergreen Mobile Home Park has been described as a sickening sight, a war zone. Brian Boyer will always remember it as a place where his 18-year-old sister Kelly lost her life. This afternoon, he went back for the first time since the tornado hit on Friday.
It's not my home anymore. It's total. It's not. I wasn't even ready for coming back here, but I had to.
Brian managed to save his 4-week-old niece, but he couldn't help his sister. Now he's looking for something to help him remember her.
So what now? What are you going to do now? Where are you going to go?
Just dig and dig and dig and try and find memories. And hopefully they're all good.
What about your life?
Just live one day at a time and hope it doesn't happen again. There's nothing else you can do.
The Ebbinghoffs, too, have been taking things one day at a time. And on this day, it's a trip to the emergency relief warehouse to replace the many things that they lost in the tornado.
Good.
Do we need a bed? There's one here.
Edmonton's relief centers have been flooded with donations. Hundreds of volunteers have come forward to help out. That's been one of the most remarkable things about the handling of this disaster, the enormous generosity with which people have responded. And Rosemarie Ebbinghoff is still trying to take it all in.
when you come in here and you think that, you know, you just don't think that would happen to you.
But it did happen to them, and now everything this family has been donated, even the roof over their heads.
But I was just overwhelmed with the response of the citizens of Edmonton, how they all got together and supported those people that were involved in this disaster.
But that his parents needed help at all was in a sense harder for Ryan to deal with than the tornado.
What freaks me out the most is to see my parents cry. Obviously that means something is wrong, and that, you know, that kind of thinks, well, what's going on here? And that's just, you know, when you're a little kid, you don't think about it. And that's how I've been, you know, when I was a little kid, I thought, well, Mommy, like something happened to me, Mommy and Daddy can take care of it, kind of thing. But it kind of opens up a lot of eyes.
I just have to have a good sit down, and I've cried an awful lot over the last few days, maybe just another good hard cry and, you know, get it out of my system and try to relax a little bit, because we've got to, you know, keep going. So.
It's just a new beginning. I have to start all over again, and I intend to do that.
For the Journal, I'm Susan Herrera in Edmonton.
Few Canadians have been forced to deal with the grief and destruction the people of Edmonton are faced with today. Tornadoes are a rare occurrence in Canada, but just over 2 years ago, on May 31st, 1985, the city of Barrie, Ontario was struck by tornadoes. 12 people were killed. There was more than $130 million damage.
Barrie has rebuilt itself, but the process has been slow and difficult. We've asked David Wilson, a survivor of the Barrie tornado, to share his experiences with Mary Grandish from Edmonton. Ms. Grandish's house was destroyed on Friday night. David Wilson, when you opened your eyes 2 years ago and you realized that you were alive, give me a sense of what the moment was like, what you smelt and heard and saw.
It's interesting that you used the word smell, because all we could smell on the basement floor was this fresh soil, the soil that the tornado, or the force of the tornado, that had upset. And immediately, that was the first sense that came to us, was this foreign scent in our house. We immediately jumped to our feet and made sure the kids were okay. Of course, it was quite dark down there, and as we came out from up the basement stairs and out the door, it was no longer our house. It was all of a sudden unreality. This kind of destruction in your own house, it's difficult to take in.
Mary Grandish, now give me a sense of what happened to you.
It was, you could say, your worst nightmare. It was unreal. See your house torn apart in front of your eyes, knowing that your little baby is in the house and you can't get to him, and not knowing if he's alive or not.
What did you do as soon as you opened your eyes and the cyclone had passed on? What did you do?
I made my way through the rubble trying to get to my 3.5-month-old son. When I got to his room was no longer there. He was sleeping in his crib. His crib was no longer there, and he was lying on the floor. I went and I picked him up and I shook him, and he was still alive. And that was, to me, that was the most important thing.
And what's happened to your mood since then, over the 3 days since that happened? Has it changed?
My mood?
What emotions have been going through you?
I guess there's a lot of mixed emotions, happiness, because we're all still here. There was 3 of us in the house, and no one really got that hurt. We're still alive, but then there's also the terror of what we went through, and hoping it will never happen again.
Well, David Wilson, as you know, went through the same thing 2 years ago, and I imagine you must have some questions. What's the first question you'd want to put to him?
If he still thinks about it, and if it's still as real as it is today.
Dave Wilson?
Mary, yes it is. I think when you set your mind to it, you can recall very vividly the sights and the sounds and again the smells of the tornado, and it does send a bit of a chill up your spine. I can just so well relate to the anguish you must have felt during those seconds of the tornado, hearing your house explode over your head and not having control of what possibly might be happening to your children. We sensed the same anguish in the midst of the destruction, in the midst of the tornado, but our children were below us. We were hovering over them. So that may haunt you for a while, but I'm sure that a sense of thankfulness will help overcome that. And I think in time your wounds will be healed by that thankfulness that you're fine.
Mary Grandish, do you have any sense yet of how you're going to go about trying to put your life together?
Not yet. Right now we're just living day by day. There's not much really to do except just sit and wait and see what's going to happen. We will eventually build again, but I'm not sure if we'll be moving right back to that same site.
What about money? Do you have enough money to start again? Is there insurance? Are they going to help?
Yes, the insurance is really good. We have no problem with insurance. They're really cooperative, but it's going to take time also.
David Wilson, what was your experience with rebuilding?
We started as quickly as we could to rebuild. In fact, we started the midst of next week. Now, again, I have to relate so well to what Mary is saying. The first few days, your confidence is torn apart, really, because you all of a sudden feel so vulnerable, and you're at the mercy of so many different people. Your insurance people, the contractors, and so on, as well as friends that are just pouring in to help you. You say what kind of mood you're in. You don't know what your moods are because you're just so full of fear and confusion that at what's going to happen. And the sooner you can get a hold of that, the sooner you start thinking in terms of today rather than tomorrow or the months to come.
Well, Mary Grandish, let me put this back to you. What I get from David Wilson is that for a few days, perhaps, he just wanted the whole world to go away. Is that what's going through your mind now?
That's exactly it. Couldn't put it in better words. Exactly. You're so confused, you don't know what to do. One minute you feel like crying, the next minute you're lost. You don't have a home to go to. Your roots are who knows where.
Good point.
What little is left is nothing really. But as long as we're here, we'll be able to start over again.
David, finally, David Wilson, perhaps some practical advice for Mary Grandish. That money is going to start pouring in, I guess. What practical advice do you have for her in terms of rebuilding?
As the insurance money does come in, and I'm glad to hear that it will. I, too, was taken well care of as far as our insurance was concerned. Very cooperative, in fact. You have to use that money wisely because you're spending a huge amount of money in a very short period of time, again, in the midst of some confusion. And you have to be very careful how you spend that money, how you put money towards the rebuilding of your home and replacing the furniture in the home and so on. That money goes so quickly that unless you're used to handling thousands and thousands of dollars on a daily or a weekly basis, it can go through your hands quickly.
Okay, Mary Grandish, I guess some little old-fashioned advice there.
Yes, we're going to need that advice.
Mary Grandish in Edmonton, David Wilson in Barrie, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
City officials in Edmonton have been working flat out on the cleanup and rescue effort since the tornado hit. Joining me now from the Emergency Services Room at Edmonton City Hall, Mayor Lawrence Decore. Mayor Decore, where were you when you heard that the tornado was coming, and how much time did you have before it hit?
I was at City Hall. The city manager and I were involved in some pretty intensive negotiations, labor negotiations. I think it was about 3:30 that we put in the Disaster Services Command Post. We were informed at 3:07 that a tornado was in the Edmonton area, so we moved very quickly.
You probably didn't know that you had a tornado plan, if in fact you did have one. What do you do in a situation like that when somebody says, Mr. Mayor, we may have a tornado?
Who would ever imagine that Edmonton, Alberta, Western Canada would have a tornado? There wasn't a plan specifically to deal with the tornado, but there was a very good disaster services system set up. And if there's anything that we did well, it was implementing and putting into effect that plan. And I think most Edmontonians are very happy with the way it worked.
This is a plan that would be applicable to a major fire, to a flood, to anything?
Any disaster that the city would have had to cope with. Last year it was a flood, this year the tornado. We put into one room the police and fire and water and sanitation people, transportation people, social services, anybody and everybody that has to be part of decision making, and everything was well coordinated.
At the same time, there's the provincial government, there's even the federal government. I suppose they are offering help, and I know in some cases there have been scenes on the ground of two separate governments wanting to offer competitive help. Did that happen?
No, that's not true. We had superb support from the provincial government, and if you saw today the registration offices where 3,000 displaced people are being dealt with, you will see an unbelievable sight, the workings of 3 levels of government and people coming out after an hour or so of going through the whole of unemployment insurance and mortgage payments and houses that are lost and trailers that are lost, being very well satisfied, by and large, with the way these levels of government have cooperated.
Mayor DeCore, what happens now? How long before all of this is over?
Well, the first part was to look after the people that were hurt or killed, finding those people. The second part is to deal with the people. There are 3,000 people that are displaced, perhaps a few more, and we've set up registration centers to deal with those people. Many people have nothing, no pictures, no blankets, nothing from their lives, and it's important to be able to put them somewhere where they're well sheltered and clothed and they have proper food and so on, deal with their lifestyles again. That's the process that we're going through now, and the third phase will be to clean up an unbelievable mess in our city.
Mayor DeCore, thanks very much.
Thank you.
The Journal returns with more on the Edmonton tornado after part of the shock of the Edmonton tornado was that it was so completely unexpected. Twisters are quite common in the so-called Tornado Alley in the Midwestern United States, but no one expected one as far north as Edmonton. Friday's disaster revealed how little is known about these freak storms. A tornado can start wherever warm, moist air collides with cold air. The collision triggers a violent thunderstorm. It could stop there, but sometimes winds begin to spin. As the warm air is forced up by the heavier, colder air, a funnel forms. The winds swirl counterclockwise at hundreds of kilometers an hour, and a low-pressure system builds up at the tip of the funnel. The end product is like a vacuum cleaner strong enough to rip homes off their foundations. Tornadoes usually strike in late afternoon, but other than that, scientists can't say much about when or where tornadoes will form. They're working on developing new techniques to track tornadoes, but even these fail to give the residents of Edmonton more than a few minutes' warning of the ominous cloud looming on the horizon.
Joining us from Halifax, science commentator Bob Fournier. Bob, why can't we predict when and where tornadoes will strike?
Well, in part, we can't predict them because we don't exactly know what drives them. And I suppose that's because they're so ephemeral. They're here and there. The average lifetime of a tornado is anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, although there are some longer, of course. But because of that, you don't know where to go and observe them. And so if you can't do that, you can't necessarily identify the features which drive them. Even now, the best people in the business can only give you a very crude estimate as to why these things do what they do. And effectively, they go out and they look at the environment and they try and correlate things. But I think there's a lot of ambiguity associated with what scientists believe and the actual situation itself.
People in Edmonton on Friday got almost no warning. I think more of them may have just simply looked up and seen the funnel than got a warning from their radio or television sets.
I think at the present state of our knowledge, that's the best that you can hope for. You can hope to be told that a situation exists that can lead to a tornado, but I don't think it's possible with a present state of knowledge to say a tornado is coming, because even if they could tell, you'd only get about 10 or 12 minutes worth of warning.
Do you know what actually makes up a tornado, what its components are?
Well, tornadoes are formed, as you're probably well aware, by the mixing of warm air and cold air, and the warm air moves up from below, and as it moves up into the upper atmosphere, it seems to be struck by high winds in the jet stream, which cause it to rotate.
Now, does that give you a simple sort of a rotating hose, or is there more to this storm than that?
Well, the most interesting observation that I have ever read was from a farmer about 60 years ago in Kansas who, just before a tornado struck, he was standing in the doorway to a cyclone cellar. He looked up, and when he did, he looked right up the center of a tornado because it was above the ground and it was not a threat to him. When he looked inside, one of the most interesting things he reported was that not only was this a tube extending up into the sky, but inside on the inner ring were lots of little tornadoes which were moving around. And scientists have since discovered that those little inner tornadoes are moving even faster than the large one and are responsible for some of the preciseness which we see in tornadoes, where they strike something and 50 feet away they don't harm it at all.
So if I see a funnel cloud on the horizon coming generally in my direction, what do you do?
Well, I think what you do what the people who are in the tornado capital of the world, which is in the area of Kansas or Texas, where they get about 1,000 of them a year, what they have done is to build cyclone cellars. They effectively have a cellar with a quick access door which they go down and hide in. And as the storm passes over, I think they survive it that way. But remember that this funnel has a low pressure area in it as well. It can suck things out. I remember one case that I read about where blankets were actually torn off a bed and drawn up a chimney right into the spout, or they plucked the feathers right off a chicken. So I don't think even a cyclone cellar is necessarily as safe as we would like it to be.
Now, Edmonton is not cyclone country, but Kansas is. Obviously, you can have cyclones in Edmonton, but you have more of them in Kansas. Why?
Well, it has to do, again, with the converging air masses. And the capital of the world, as said, is in Kansas, but warm air moves up from the Gulf of Mexico. Cold air comes down from the central part of North America, and the two converge, and they give you lots of thunderstorms and lots of tornadoes. As you move away from that to the north, up to about 50 degrees north, seems to be the upper limit, although Edmonton is about 53 degrees. The necessary combination of warm, moist air and cold, dry air doesn't work anymore. And so it's only on those odd situations that you get it happening. For example, tornadoes generally happen in late afternoons. And the reason that they do is because in late afternoon you've got the heat of the day building up, and then that warm, moist air begins to rise. That produces a thunderstorm. Sometimes that thunderstorm gets exaggerated out into a tornado and turns into this violent spiral effect.
Bob Fournier, thanks very much.
Thank you.
The Journal returns after this.
Prime Minister Brian Mulroney took a walk through the wreckage of the Evergreen Trailer Court tonight. He talked to residents and promised them that there would be no shortage of money to help rebuild their homes. Shauna Larrett reports.
This is what the Prime Minister came to see, the Evergreen Trailer Court after Friday's tornado. He walked through debris with Alberta cabinet ministers surrounded by reporters. But he was there to learn firsthand what had happened to the people. He talked to some who were there trying to salvage their personal treasures.
We're supposed to see our insurance agent tomorrow morning.
Well, they told me that they've been processing very quickly. People have been there, have been well looked after. I hope that's the case. Yeah, so let me know. Hey, good luck to you. Thanks. Good luck. And this is Sarah? Sarah. Both, eh? Say hi.
The Prime Minister didn't have much time, but he didn't pass any of the people by.
No, she survived.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I gather they were both blown out. She got out of the room somehow.
How far were they physically blown out of the impact?
I don't know. She didn't come back.
Just out
just
on the
out
line?
that wall out there. She went out that wall and covered up with some
Fury
debris.
of it must have been just unbelievable.
It was a short trip, just over an hour, but Mulroney said he was pleased with the relief effort he saw for the tornado's homeless victims. He told reporters there would be no shortage of money to help them rebuild their homes.
No, I didn't contemplate any amount. I just said further to discussions with Premier Getty and to Mr. Mazenkoski, we'll do whatever is necessary to be helpful. I never put a dollar figure on it.
Shauna Larrett, CBC News, Edmonton.
In Sherwood Park's industrial area, business people were getting their first glimpse of the devastation today. And in Edmonton, the first 29 people were given housing from a victim assistance center. Paul Adams reports.
We have our map. It's 9:30 at the Emmy Lizert School. Volunteers are being briefed on how to help tornado victims who are about to arrive seeking help. By 10 o'clock, the school is filling up with people, mostly homeowners from Clairview and the Evergreen Mobile Home Park. They're being interviewed about their immediate needs. In one room, they're arranging for unemployment insurance and social assistance for those who need it. In another, they're working to arrange temporary accommodation for the homeless. It's the destruction of their homes that's brought most of the people here today.
Like you say, you sleep at night, you wake up in the morning, and you're thinking, what should we do now? What should we do? So basically, when we come down here, we should find all the answers.
Well, we've lost everything. We've got to have a place to live, and that till our insurance comes through.
I'd like to find out what I'm going to get reimbursed for, whether they're going to fix my trailer. Actually, I don't know whether it's worth fixing.
About 500 families lost their homes last Friday. The government's providing a month's free accommodation for those dislodged. But the government won't guess how many hundreds of jobs have been lost in the battered Sherwood Park industrial area. Some operations, like trucking companies, may be able to lease vehicles and be back in business quickly. But the Labor Minister says some manufacturers may not be back in full operation for 6 to 9 months. 3 days after the tornado struck, the industrial area still looks like a bomb site. 3 days ago, this was a parking lot. Now it looks like a wrecker's yard. The RCMP finished their search and rescue here this morning, and by noon they were packing up their gear. Minutes later, business owners and employees were lining up for permission to enter the area for the first time since Friday. Each of them got a warning like this, saying you enter a disaster area at your own risk. This structural engineer is here to advise people entering the area.
Most of the buildings are quite dangerous. We had the opportunity to walk through, and some of the buildings that we walked through, we quickly found out that we shouldn't have been there either.
But despite the warnings, people were scrambling through buildings this afternoon, salvaging what they could. Graham Heath has just returned to his business with insurance adjusters. An early estimate puts total damage at $50,000 to $100,000. This expensive piece of equipment, now just a piece of junk, will cost over $20,000 to replace. But Heath figures he's one of the lucky ones.
Native Edmontonian, and tornadoes I thought were things that other people have, not us. So it's quite a really surprise. It's very hard to take it all in, really, the extent of the damage, and all the landmarks are missing, and it's really strange, very, very strange feeling. And we feel very, very lucky. We feel almost it's nothing more than a minor irritation than what we've suffered compared to the devastation that's all around us here.
A few hundred meters away, Versatile Cold Storage is already back in operation. But Versatile is an exception amidst the wreckage of Friday's storm. It took only minutes for this to happen. It will take months, perhaps years, to repair. Paul Adams, CBC News, Edmonton.
One of the companies hard hit by the tornado will be back in business tomorrow. The staff of Buyers Transport have been working through the weekend, and they'll be in new facilities tomorrow morning. The company has gathered equipment from other branches and found a warehouse on 76th Avenue. Meanwhile, police have laid another charge of looting in connection with Friday's tornado. A man was found taking $2,000 worth of machinist tools from Lee Mason Tools on 27th Street. 28-year-old Timothy Doan appears in court tomorrow. This is the third person to be charged in relation to looting after the tornado. Police, of course, are trying to cut back those losses, and they're doing that by checking all vehicles that are leaving the industrial area. The City of Edmonton is going to hold a memorial service for the victims of the tornado Thursday night. That will be at 7 o'clock at the Convention Center. Today, about 200 people attended a service at St. John Bosco Church in Clairview. It was held for the families of those killed in the tornado and those who survived it. Survivors like Connie and Joe Goling. Kelly McClugan reports.
Late Friday evening, Connie Goling returns home. But her home is gone, and she has no way of knowing just how much of her life is left.
I lost my son 7 months ago today, and now I gotta find my other one. I can't talk, I can't talk.
Sherman, Andrew Charles, Merle Bain,
Marie Barker.
Today, at a memorial service, as they read the list of those who died, Connie Goling gives thanks. Her son is alive. Her husband Joe is beside her. Her family is one. But her life is still in pieces, and so like many others here, she turns to God, looking for comfort.
I want to come to share with those who are grieving. I want to be part of their grieving, part of their lives, part of their suffering. I want to come to try to understand better why these tragedies happen.
Hey, my faith is the only thing that's going to pull me through. Jesus is still carrying me, and God's given me the strength to do it. So,
What do you want moved?
that trailer.
The kind of strength she will need as she returns home to search through what is left.
All of my stuff is under there. My lock boxes, my clothes, everything. My baby books.
No, I don't need yours.
Where to begin? Connie and Joe have been given only 45 minutes to sort through their belongings. It's not a lot of time. So friends like 12-year-old Derek Orcas lend a hand.
Oh, how could this happen? And I feel sorry for the others that got killed and hurt in this. And I wish it never happened.
You want this?
Is it hard? Do you feel like you've had to grow up an awful lot in a really short space of time?
Yeah, it does a little bit.
Every once in a while, there's a real find, like this old wedding picture.
Oh, this is my husband's family. Isabel. My husband's family.
But more than that, Connie wants to find the photograph of her son, who died 7 months ago.
They can't be replaced. I've got 2 sets of twins. My oldest set of twins are 33. My youngest set are 18. Half of that's gone. No pictures. It's like I never existed. It's frustrating.
And sometimes that frustration proves too much.
I just want to say to hell with it and go home. Leave it all and start from scratch. I don't want to be bothered with this garbage.
Where is home?
Don't have one. Come to think about it. Oh, I don't know.
In the meantime, Joe loads his belongings onto a truck. There's no time to worry about what he doesn't have, only time to be grateful for what he does have.
Everybody's alive. Nobody dead. Everybody's alive. I hope they're not, hope they'll recover.
Is that sense of home gone for you?
Oh, yeah? It's gone. I don't know what I'm going to do after this. I'll have to go through the procedures, find out what I'm going to do.
Take it bit by bit?
Day by day, bit by bit, as it comes along. If things go good, well, okay, fine. And if things don't go, well, then they don't go, I guess.
And as he speaks, Connie finds what she has been looking for, the photograph of her son.
Okay, sweetheart. Okay. Okay. I'm with you.
I want to roll away. I just want to go.
Okay, I'm with you.
Kelly McClugan, CBC News, Edmonton.
The initial shock of being hit by a tornado is perhaps over for most people, and now comes the grief that follows when you lose absolutely everything. Today at the Evergreen Trailer Park, people continued the search for their valuables and their personal treasures. Shauna Larrett reports.
Is this? That's an extra shower curtain that was in the... But we don't have the shower anymore, so I guess we don't need that.
It stopped raining today at the Evergreen Trailer Court. People kept looking in the wreckage, trying to find anything to show that they really lived here. Lots of things have been found, some placed in this shelter for people to claim.
Oh, that's my wedding album. Oh, great. Super.
Yeah, that's what I was looking through this morning.
That's me.
Yeah, that's you.
Years ago.
Part of the reason why people search is to help them cope with losing everything. Murray Mace was in his kitchen when the tornado hit. His fiancée and his children were out shopping. His future father-in-law was killed in the tornado. Murray was all alone on Friday night.
And I pulled all the chairs. This is one of my chairs right here. I
pulled all the chairs around, and the trailer started to lift, and then things just got smaller and smaller. And all I could think then is I was just waiting to die. It's, you know, something's going to come through me, squish me, anything.
Murray is getting married next weekend. He's here today with friends to find anything that will help him do that.
Here's your marriage registration.
Are you serious?
Murray has a lot to do before he gets married this Saturday. The wedding plans are keeping him busy, and he's holding on to his emotions very well.
I've been sleeping well. The more I think of it, though, it's just like I've never been this scared ever. Like, you know, I was inside the trailer. There's nothing you can do. It's like something out there is coming to get you, and you're useless.
Being busy keeps Murray from thinking much about his helplessness. And psychologist Bruce Monkhouse says for some, that's good.
It's better to try and not preoccupy yourself with the tornado. I agree with that. To get on with your life as best you can, but some of these people are going to need some space just to recollect their thoughts.
Murray leaves with some of his belongings. He says after today, he's not coming back, and he's not going to live in a trailer ever again.
I'll give you a hand.
A couple of blocks away, Adrian Fowler and his friends search near what used to be his home. Adrian wasn't here when the tornado hit. His family wasn't either. They decided to stay put when the storm started getting ugly. But now it's hard to tell the children why they can't come home.
They just can't understand it. You know, they want to come out, they want to know where we're going to live, what school they're going to go to. Like Horse Hill School is just back over there. They want to know if the school was good. They're asking about friends. Most of them we found. Some we still don't know.
So Adrian keeps looking to find things for his children, his wife, and for him.
These yours?
Yep, they're mine. Out of the closet. Get some of the frustrations out. At times I see how far I can throw something, just so I can throw it. Wake up in the morning and you're sore, but you're still going back at it. Because there is something left, a little bit, somewhere. If we can find it, then it makes it a part of our lives a little bit more better.
Adrian has trouble concentrating. He's emotional, he's hurt. And Dr. Monkhouse says that's what's expected.
People can become dramatically black moods, anxiety, looking up at the sky and wondering if it's going to happen again. Can become quite withdrawn from their friends and family and work, lose their concentration. They can't seem to focus on anything. Any combination of those things is possible for some of these people. And again, the difficulty is there's no set timeline. It could be a week, it could be months down the road.
Adrian says his family will rebuild here. They're not moving away, they're just moving on.
We learned that we've got each other, and the material things, they count, but they aren't the final end. The family is. And we'll just keep going.
Shauna Larrett, CBC News, Edmonton.
The Alberta Public Safety Office has registered 90 families for loss or damage claims, while other agencies are providing things like transportation, food, and other needed assistance. Counselors as well are on hand to work with families trying to cope with the disaster. A support group, for example, will be meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the M.E. Lazert School. Anyone that still needs help has been asked to please contact the Assistance Center at M.E. Lazert School. It will be open tomorrow from 10 in the morning until 9 in the evening, and if you need a drive, call 476-8611. The number again, if you need a drive, is 476-8611. Volunteers have been going straight out ever since Friday night, helping the tornado victims, but the needs of those people has been changing daily. Here's Christine Ritchie to update the relief effort.
They bring it in here, right?
Another day at the Emergency Relief Center, and donations keep pouring in. More than 5,000 volunteers have been sorting them since Friday afternoon.
We bump into each other, we run into each other with carts, and nobody hollers at the next one. It's sorry and I'll get out of the way kind of thing. It's a very, I get a little choked up once in a while.
You have some there? One room at the center has been set aside for food, but it can't hold anymore, so organizers want food donations to be dropped off at the food bank. And while there's plenty of food and clothing, they now need beds and dressers. Once that's done, the organizer says they'll be able to make new homes for the hundreds who lost them in the tornado.
The mountains and mountains of clothing and food that they've sorted through in the last 2 or 3 days is utterly awesome. And when they come in, we can go to a pile and we can say, okay, this is boys' jeans, and these are size 32 slacks, and we can get it. It's there, we can go to it, we can walk to it, and we can get it to the families that need it.
A few blocks away, the second warehouse is filling up with even more donations.
You guys can stack them over here now. What about suitcases? Suitcases, put them in that empty room.
Full truckloads have been arriving from Saskatoon, Edson, and Red Deer. Organizers expect close to 2,000 victims of the tornado will sort through these walls of donations over the next few days as they try to pick up the pieces and start over again. Christine Ritchie, CBC News, Edmonton.
And this is a strange coincidence. Alberta's sister province in China, Harbin, was also hit by a tornado this Friday afternoon. Some 16 people were killed in that storm, 1,800 homes destroyed. Mayor Lawrence Decore and the mayor of Harbin have exchanged messages of condolence. Well, as we mentioned earlier on News Final, the Prime Minister is in our city tonight. He came here to talk about details of a $1 billion economic aid package for Western Canada.
The Prime Minister was in Winnipeg today, and he had another comment on Canada's immigration policies.
Complained that there wasn't enough time to brace themselves for the tornado. Environment Canada had put out severe weather warnings early in the afternoon. The first tornado warning came at 3:07. The tornado touched down in Mill Woods at 3:25. Richard Zarowski is a meteorologist in Windsor, Ontario, nearby Michigan and Ohio, and that part of Ontario is known as a tornado belt. Richard, you're standing in Windsor right now. We can see Detroit behind you. You work with both the American and Canadian weather services. Now, can you tell us what is the difference in the way that the two handle tornadoes?
Well, basically, the Environment Canada system is modeled after the National Weather Service in the United States, but the big difference is that the National Weather Service in the States has all its severe weather forecasting located in Kansas City. So the whole United States gets its severe weather watches out of Kansas City, and all their meteorologists that work there have a lot of experience in forecasting tornadoes. Now in Canada, it does not work like that. Each individual weather center, like the Edmonton Weather Center or the Toronto Weather Center or the Montreal Weather Center, does its own forecasting for watches and warnings. And in many cases, because they don't see a lot of severe weather, they're not experienced in tornadoes. So that seems to be the biggest difference.
But wouldn't one of the downfalls of the American system be that you'd have a lot of people perhaps inadvertently, not meaning to, but crying wolf anyway?
Well, there is a fine line that needs to be walked there. Like, you don't want to call wolf too many times, but they seem to have a good handle on it. It seems as though in watches and warnings, 40 to 50% of the tornadoes that do pop up are through the watches and warnings, so they've been quite successful.
The problem, of course, from what I've heard, is that you can't tell it's a tornado until it actually touches down.
In the case of a warning, that is definitely true. There are so many factors that go to making up a tornado and forecasting when a tornado is going to strike that, yes, indeed, you cannot say a tornado is going to happen until really it does touch down. Okay, so clarify some of this for us, Richard. Is the American system better than ours? Do we need to be copying them? What does Environment Canada need to do at this point? Now, this is strictly my own opinion, but I think the American system for forecasting tornadoes is better. And the main reason hinges around the fact that their forecasters in Kansas City have seen many, many tornadoes and the situations that give rise to tornadoes. Whereas here in Canada, our weather forecasters might see one or two through a career of the type that you had in Edmonton the other day. And that seems to be the biggest reason that perhaps our weather forecasting may not be as good in terms of severe forecasting for tornadoes. Okay, so you're suggesting a lack of experience then. And what I'm saying then is, what can Environment Canada do? What should they be thinking about doing so that this doesn't happen? Well, basically, they could centralize the severe weather forecasting. I think that would be a step in the right direction. The other thing is more use of spotters, volunteer trained people who understand what a tornado is and are able to relay that information to the weather office very quickly. Now, we do have it in Canada, but it's still just being started, so that's something else that we could do. Okay, Richard, thanks for talking with us. Very good, Joanne. Bye-bye.